Good morning, everybody. Are you ready to begin? My name is Sebastian Towns, and I am from the Hustings Green Party. And I would like to thank you all very much indeed for coming. A couple of minutes of housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire alarm. If you do hear anything, see anything that looks like fire, you go to the door at the back, and the toilets are also at the back. We have to pay for the use of this building today. Rotary will be very grateful to accept your donations to cover the cost as you leave, and there is tea and coffee at the back if you wish. We're going to split the event into two. Our leadership candidates have to be in Cambridge to do the same thing this afternoon, so we're on a fairly strict timetable so that they will all catch their trains. Could I just have a rough show of hands now to let me know that if you haven't submitted a question, if you're intending to ask one from the floor, if there's time. Okay. Thank you very much. We have all the candidates here. We are expecting the deputy leadership candidates later on. The format will be the teaching candidate will have opening remarks of 5 minutes. Then we will proceed to the questions. The way we will do the questions is most questions have been submitted in advance. They were scored by myself, Rosemary, and an independent person who's not a member of the Green Party, and we will ask them in the order of the highest scores. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to answer. I've never been fond of the word achievement, because I think if we just get ourselves in the frame of mind and enjoy a minute's quiet while we ask ourselves why we're here and what we want to do. Our first candidate for the leadership, Leslie.
Hello, my name is Leslie Rowe, and I'm from Yorkshire. Now, you're asking why am I just an ordinary member standing as a candidate for leadership? Well, I'm going to be catalyst for change, to encourage discussion of important alternative policies for the party to look forward and not backwards. Because I believe the Green Party has lost its connection with its roots, with its members. We can start by giving policy back to the older members like you and me, replacing stage-managed party conferences with online debate, building up our policy to engage with the whole membership, not just a few hundred who can afford the time and money to go to conferences. But looking on a wider stage, Podemos in Spain, Syriza in Greece, the five-star movement in Italy, what do they all have in common? They each, in their own way, gave their country hope and achieved great political success on that. Now, the Green Party is a great party. Great ideas, great integrity, but our voice is being lost in the incessant clamour of traditional politics. We need to stand out, to be different, to become a beacon of hope in this landscape of despair. And we need to build on our strengths. So what is our biggest strength? We are the Green Party. So as the Green Party, we need to start taking effective action on climate change. And why is climate change so important, you might ask? Well, I could refer you to Under a Green Sky by a doctor from America, and he says more than 200 million years ago, a cataclysmic event known as the Permian extinction destroyed 97% of all living things. He has very compelling evidence here that that was down entirely to climate change. So climate change, I think, is the most important thing we have to face. And to take effective action, that means we need an economic strategy on degrowth, not on increasing consumption. At the Climate Change Conference in Warsaw in 2013, we were told that if the world wishes to avoid avoid exceeding the 2 degrees rise in global temperatures that will trigger non-reversible climate change, and we're very close now, then the wealthiest countries, including the UK, have to adopt a degrowth strategy. Also, continuing with economic growth over the coming 2 decades is incompatible with meeting our international obligations on climate change. Now, that was 5 years ago. Time is running out. So let's start with a degrowth strategy for the UK. But that means rejecting the neoliberal economic orthodoxy of the EU. Well, you say, well, we can change the policy of the EU, can't we? Well, no, we can't. It's totally at odds. John Paul Juncker, and his opening statement that the President of the European Commission said, and I quote, economic growth is the main goal of the single market. And there's no evidence this is ever going to change. Indeed, Greece has just been locked into 43 years of austerity. In fact, economic policy in the EU is controlled by the unelected and secretive Eurogroup. As Yanis Varoufakis said in his book, Adults in the Room, democracy, it has indeed died the moment the Eurogroup acquired the authority to dictate economic policy to member states without anything resembling democratic sovereignty. So, as I say, to be able to achieve growth, we need to accept the result of the 2016 EU referendum and move on, look forward, not back. We need our own policy, EU involvement states, to replace the unsustainable economics of free trade and unrestricted growth with the ecological alternative of local self-reliance and resource conservation. So that means rejecting all free trade agreements, including the single market. So we in the UK now have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to remodel our society, our economy, to focus on greater self-reliance and stronger local economies, to focus on the needs of people, ordinary people, not corporate interests and multinational conglomerates, to create sustainable jobs in a sustainable economy. By looking forward, not back, we can put the Green Party into the vanguard of change, create a new and attractive economic paradigm based on traditional green values, and at the same time address the unsustainable balance of trade deficit and the unsustainable levels of public and private debt. So let's stop being a fringe party trying to nudge social change. Let's start deciding our own future and the future of our country. Looking forward to a brighter green alternative with clear and distinctive green alternative policies to the current Tory nightmare. Happy to discuss all these ideas with you at the question and answers. Thank you very much.
This is my free advertising. Just let me know when you're starting.
And when you start, I'll start.
Testing. Well, it's a real honour, privilege to be able to present myself before you as Shara Ali, candidate for leader of the Green Party. And I think it's a really good turnout, actually. I'm very heartened to see so many of you coming out on a Saturday morning, where the news story of the week is, it rained in London, in summer. And I think, actually, whilst there has been potentially a little bit more interest in why has that extreme weather event happened, are we going to get more of them? And consequently, a bit more interest in climate change. It would be a mistake for us to add our voice to, look, we told you so. Because actually, it isn't just when we get very hot weather that we should be worrying. It's when we're not talking about the weather at all. Because as we speak, people are suffering the consequences of the West's overconsumption, whether in Bangladesh or the Maldives. Rising sea levels are happening now. And there's a double injustice there. Because it's the people who are least responsible for climate change impacts, who are most having to suffer the consequences of them, and are least able to afford the remedial action required to do that. So just in that assertion, in that realisation of climate injustice, you get recognition of what the Green Party is about. And yes, just as Leslie has said, we do need to be loud and clear, voluminous about the climate change emergency. And for sure, that's something that we need to return to as a party with vigour, to ensure that we, as potentially the last generation who can do something about it, are doing something about it. So why am I standing as leader of the Green Party? It's not a desire, it's not a want, that's not strong enough, it's a calling. I genuinely feel as if I have no choice. You can see, or you may be able to hear, my young uns there. It's for them, for sure, but it's also for those future generations. People long into the future, maybe 100 years from now. Our children's 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 children. They aren't around now. They don't exist. They have no way of looking back into the past and saying, taking us by the short and curlies and saying, look, you knew about this, you knew about the science, and you did diddly squat about it. I want us to have in our mind not those bankrupt ideological pacts with other parties, but we need to have the vision and ambition to say our alliance, our true progressive alliance, is with those future generations. We need to have that imaginative capacity. We need to communicate that to our contemporaries and say they are our true alliance. They are the ones, whilst they don't exist, whilst they cannot press their claims upon us, they do have a claim upon us to leave as much and as good for the next generation as we enjoy, as surely we do today. And it isn't just, when we talk about politics, we tend to think about looking after number one. It's not about looking after number one. Politics is about service, and it's about social goods and basic needs being met. It never has been about looking after little old me, yet that's the logic of politics that we're faced with. And we need to shift that reference, because people do care about other people. They do want to hear politicians talk about altruism. There it is, I got it out. We care about other people.
1 minute to go.
So it isn't just number one, and it isn't just about human beings, believe it or not. It isn't just about contemporaries half around the world, 24,000 people dying of malnutrition and preventable disease. It's also about the other species, other animals that we share this beautiful planet with. That is a tremendous responsibility. That's why I describe my standing as leader of the Green Party as a calling. It's the only party with the ambition, the resolve, and the people. Every member is an extraordinary member. I believe that the Green Party is its people. And we are a large army, if you want to call it that. And this is a war footing we need to get to. It's nothing short of that. It's an emergency, and we are the only party with the resolve and the ambition to be able to tackle it. And that's why I'm standing as your leader, and I hope you will give me your careful consideration.
Well, thank you for coming out. I was pretty convinced there would be a useless turnout. It's brilliant to see you all here, and I hope we do get to the questions from the audience. So I want to talk about why I'm standing, first of all, and I'm standing together with Jonathan Bartley as a team for the leadership, and we really want to do this job for our party. I've certainly been asked to stand before. For me, it was either not the right time or I wanted to back someone else. And we've had fantastic people in these leadership positions up to now. I have, I think, grown so much as a politician personally in the last 4 years. I think getting elected as a councillor in Camden in 2014 changed me completely. Just having those extra levers, having extra platform, having those people's lives through casework. And casework, I don't know if some of you are counsellors in the audience now, casework is one of those most grounding things that you do. It keeps you rooted in the genuine experiences of people's daily lives. And I'm overrun with housing cases, with people with benefits problems, people that the government are absolutely ignoring at the moment and stomping on. And I don't understand how people who are elected as, for example, Tory councillors, when they go to their surgeries, how can they possibly keep supporting things like the welfare changes that are being made? How can they completely ignore that when they're meeting those people every week on surgeries? So I think I've learned a lot from that. I've also fought lots of campaigns. After winning my seat in the council, I worked on Natalie Bennett's constituency in 2015. I stood for London in 2016 for the second time. And obviously now I'm also elected to the London Assembly, where I've also learned an awful lot about how to work with other parties in a more cooperative way, but also the important voice that we have in challenging Labour, because we've got a Labour man. He made lots of fancy promises in that election, and I've spent a lot of my time in the Assembly exposing the gaps, the shortfalls in his policy, and I think I've done that quite effectively, but also I've managed to change some of his policies to what was in our manifesto. So I've managed to win ballots on estates. For youth work, I've managed to win £45 million in funds he had no intention of doing when he first got elected. So I think I am now ready to be in the leadership team, and I think standing as co-leaders is the right thing to do. I think we're not a party that puts all its faith in one person, in one personality. Being co-leaders of the party, I think, really embodies our green values. People did think it was kind of a novelty when Jonathan and Caroline first stood for it in 2016, but I think people really do get it now, and I will continue our model with Jonathan now. So, on to our pledges. Now, this is a scary, horrible world at the moment. We are seeing now, and we're having it brought home to us now, the effects of climate change already happening. The question now is not, can we stop this, but how bad will it get? And the consequences for the distant people around the world, the consequences for people at the bottom here in this country, climate are going to be huge, and we're talking about that. As a party, we've got a growing reputation. We're quite buoyant in spirits after the local elections this year. And we've got two big election tests coming up in 2019, local elections, and 2020 here in London. During those 2 years, we must have the best team leading us. We must have the best plan to develop the party. And that's what we have. We have important pledges around training. I genuinely thought I knew to I've been doing it since 2001, but the help I got from the West Midlands in doing it in a much more strategic way, in a much cleverer way, winning votes of all the other parties, led by James Byrne from the West Midlands, the training that we all got around London, and our target was for that. It made such an absolute difference. Everybody in the party needs to be able to get that training. And then campaigning too. I'm a campaigner by trade. As a party, we need to be campaigning much harder on issues, and I think that's how we widen our pool of spokespeople, people who are known to the rest of the country as well, by putting them at the head of those issue-based campaigns. I want training in direct action, I want training in strategic campaigning for parties around the country. And I think, Jonathan would say we stood as rivals 3 years ago, running for the Mayor of London candidacy, and we had heated arguments about the best way to do things. And I think we've both learned that the other one was right in the course of the last 3 years. And now we stand as a united team. I think we'll be a very effective team leading the party. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you all three. We'll move to questions. Call from the submitted ones, and then I'll go to the floor and I'll work between them. The first question was by Charles Nelson. Is Charles Nelson here? Now I shall ask his question for him. It is a fact that sadly Russia has been actively sabotaging democracy in many of our allies' nations, as well as being the only nation to benefit from Brexit. From funding these parties, the spread of information online and through intimidation, as well as the recent chemical attacks. How would you, as leaders of the Green Party, respond?
This is about Russia at the beginning, and do you believe all the propaganda about chemical attacks? Personally, I'm a bit sceptical about all that, and I'm sceptical about an awful lot of propaganda that's coming out of this government at the present time. I think, as I indicated in this speech, what I would like to do is talk to members about this particular issue and throw it open to an open debate and see what people really do think about the perceived threat from Russia. Personally, I'm no wiser than you are, and all I do know is that if you're going to put chemical weapons out, then I would suggest if you're a Russian, you'd know how to use them and you would kill people, not sort of leave them to hide in obscurity somewhere. So I'm very sceptical about a lot of the propaganda that's coming out on this one, but I do think it's something that the members should sit down and discuss.
Thank you.
So when Sebastian was reading out that pithy description of that rogue state, I was wondering whether he was talking about Trump's America, incarcerating children. So I think the first thing that I would want to articulate, having been international spokespersons a few years back, is in our international policy we've got to be sure of betraying double standards. Of course there are despotic regimes out there. Saudi Arabia, who we do business with. We need to make sure that we choose wisely which campaigns, which human rights violations we draw attention to. Anna Politkovskaya has been recording Russian misdemeanor in ballot boxes for many years now, a bit like George Bush hanging chads. So we can see that we shouldn't just selectively attack another country. Now, having said that, I do think there is an opportunity here for relationship building with Russia. And one of the extraordinarily unpredictable things about Trump is in meeting, not just with King Jong-il, but with meeting with Putin. That's a relationship, whatever else you want to call it. Maybe it takes one to see one. But that does create stability. Whereas United Kingdom, ratcheting up the belligerent talk following a poisoning in this country, personally, I feel that was disproportionate. Corbyn was absolutely right to ask for evidence. We have processes, we have international bodies who will test and check whether those chemicals came from the place that people are being accused of. So we have to be evidence-based. We do need to ensure that international relations is conducted in a civilised manner, where we don't just up the ante and engage in belligerent talk on Twitter sphere or wherever it might be.
Thank you. I think we have to be very careful. Diplomacy is in a very confusing and scary place at the moment. We have got all kinds of rows going on that are about personal things, little things, and actually, I think our role in the Green Party is to keep our eyes on the bigger picture. So, with respect to Russia and meddling in elections, the work that Molly has been doing, Molly, the MEP, has been doing, exposing the corruption within the Leave campaign, exposing the corruption there, has been absolutely fantastic. And that's work we should definitely be doing, defending democracy. When it comes to the kind of personality-based diplomacy that's going on, I think we need to be very careful to stay out of that, because the bigger picture is our role as an advocate for world peace. We are right to be there criticising the UK government for not turning up to nuclear weapons reduction talks. We are right to be raising climate change agreements and withdrawal from climate change agreements of the USA as being a threat to world peace. And I think that's our role when it comes to democracy, standing up for human rights, against arms sales across the board, and not being distracted, not being dragged into these personality-based arguments. I think Jeremy Corbyn was probably mistaken to intervene in that argument. I think he should have been focused more on the bigger picture, and I think that's our role in the Green Party.
First on the next question, which was submitted by Robert McCracken. Is Robert in the room? Robert is from Kempton Green Party. Do you agree that on the first Sunday of the month, the use of motor vehicles, other than emergency and public service vehicles, should generally be prohibited between the hours of 6 a.m. and 4 p.m? Sure.
This isn't one of your yes-no
questions.
because if it was, I would say it's not specific enough. Where, what domain, but the timing is. This really does feed into the idea of encouraging people to get away from their love affair with the motor car. I'd love to be able to do that. I'd love to be us to be part of that campaign. We are, Car Free Day, whatever you want to call it. And there are many drivers and many motivations why we would want to promulgate that practice of pedestrianisation, of cycling. People love to use their bodies when they're locomoting from A to B. They don't want to have to use cars for the school run. They want a safe route to their school where they can walk their kids. So yes, I'm in favour, in principle, of shifting our modes of transport. I also want to ensure that public transport is properly public. And that does mean, unfortunately, costly though it may be, bringing into reign all those hyper-expensive franchises who are not putting the passenger first.
Yes, is my one word answer to that. But no, yeah, there's a very strong movement in London at the moment to go towards more car-free days. There's a very minimal ask on Sadiq Khan, who's not done anything concrete about this yet since he's been elected, to have one car-free day in September this year. And I think he's thinking, yes, he might. We talked to him about it in Mayor's Question Time recently, and we tried to push him really hard on whether he'd do one before Christmas, and he was nearly said yes. So we're getting there. Well, one car-free day is useless, and Sunday, as Robert's question suggests, is the right way to go. I'd be I think it's clever to go for one Sunday a month, because Sunday's the day when you're not in so much of a hurry, fewer people need to drive, and to have that as the day which is car free would do an amazing thing, which is show people what the streets are like when there aren't any cars. And then once people see that, I think the movement, the growth and popularity of having more car free days, of generally reducing road transport, will change a lot. So I think it's a clever idea. Those Sundays would be brilliant, but also it's a step on the way towards a more car-free London as well. And I think we should be doing that, not just in London, but in absolutely every city around the country as well. If we can get the whole country used to the fact that Sunday's car-free day, that would be so brilliant.
I'd like to point out, my fellow candidates, that England well is not just London. When I came here, I was one of the great things working about them were called buses. Now, where I come from in North Yorkshire, the bus is actually driven by volunteers. Local people volunteer to go out to provide buses. My bus, to get to the station from where I am, I have to take 2 buses. It would have been impossible for me to get here this morning if I'd done that. Unless we've got a good and comprehensive public transport system, this is a policy devised by Londoners for Londoners, and fine, if you want to do it London, excellent, do that. But honestly, where we are in the countryside, if you have a day where you can't use your car, then you're stuck, and you can't get to your appointment. People can't get to the hospital because there isn't the public transport available. And so we need, more importantly than this, we need a good and comprehensive public transport system with the right investment. Cancel the fancy trains and put all of the investment into new trains, new buses, etc. And then possibly you might think about such a policy.
Thank you. As brief as you can.
Dr. Isla, Standing Appointment and Chancellor Green Party. In May of this year, 20,000 scientists, who are the Union of Concerned Scientists, signed a statement to say that population growth is the primary driver of the global environmental crisis, and they said that we should reconsider family size in the future. So my question is, in addition to campaigning for reduced consumption and plant-based diets, why does the Green Party not talk about population and family size more when it's the most important issue, which makes everything else worse?
Thank you. Sean?
I'm going to sound like Leslie here, right? So when I say, I don't think it is the people that are the problem, it's the consumption of the people. There's a brilliant map been done by, I'm not sure who, but I'm sure I can find it on Twitter, that shows countries not by population size, but by the amount they consume. And if you look at that, the global south virtually disappears, even though it's full of people. So it's not about the number of people, it's about how they live and what they consume. And I don't like very much a lot of the population-based campaigns that seem to be focused on women and their choices and saying, you know, you shouldn't be able to choose how many children you have. I think you should be able to choose. And the most important thing we can do, if you want to make sure that birth rates go down, is empower women to choose how many children they have. Because when they have the choice, they choose lower amounts on average, and that's one way to do it. But actually, I wouldn't have a policy that focused on population at all. I'd have a policy that focused on consumption and focused on more equal consumption throughout the world.
The trouble with that is that equal consumption means that everyone in India has two cars, as same as everybody in the West, you know. I think that this is a policy, as I said about the previous policies, we need to discuss as a party, as a membership. So let's throw it over to me on a personal level. Yes, I think family planning is an important issue which we should be campaigning upon, because there is a limit to how many people can support, especially if they are all consuming the extraordinary amount of consumption currently in the West. So I think it is something that we need to look at. I think it's something that the membership should have a voice on, and it's certainly something that we should be discussing and bringing forward policy for the future. Thank you.
Charles?
But can I get the gloves off, Leslie? Is that okay? Look, I think the first thing I would say, I think the first thing I would say is that you don't have the luxury of having a personal position in politics, in a role, and a publicly stated one. Ideally, your position that you believe is the one that you can articulate publicly. And what I will say, first of all, is the initial premise that population is a problem is not something that as Greens we need to deny. Population growth, the very thing that results in destabilisation of the climate because of the finite resources, is because of human beings, Homo sapiens. When last time I checked, we were a pretty wretched species doing that to our planet. So yes, population, maximal population has been reached. Does that mean then that we need to point our fingers in a neo-colonialist way at other countries, call them developing countries, and say, you've got to lower your consumption? Whether it's China, whether it's coal-fired power stations, whether it's India and entrepreneurs saying we want to do more flying. We're not going to be doing that because we're at the top of the tree in terms of overconsumption. Absolutely right. But in terms of a long-term strategy for contraction and convergence, remember that? Of course, we need to make sure that all of us are living within our means. And if that means that somebody is doing slightly less evil, that they can be let off the hook, no. But it does mean we need to be aware of our own hypocrisy and double standards if we are pointing our fingers in a neo-colonialist way. As Sean has already alluded to, and I want to go a bit bigger on that, education is the key. I've met with the founder of Mary's Meals, a fantastic proposition and campaign to make sure that school children in Africa had 1 meal a day. And at a stroke, that education, that feeding of them, results in less population. So it's a win-win. You improve with infrastructure, people's quality of life, and you also, not as a primary goal, but as a secondary consequence, you will help that situation.
Thank you. The next question is submitted by Hannah Graham, who I can see is here. Hannah, do you want to ask it yourself, or are you happy for me to ask it? So Hannah is from the Green Party. What methods would you employ to diversify candidates, representatives within the party, in particular with young Greens and BAME people? Leslie.
methods for candidate representation, I think that, again, it comes down to involving the whole membership. What I was talking about earlier, about having debates for the whole membership and doing it online, I think that would instill new enthusiasm, new interest in local parties, and therefore make what they've got to offer local people much more interesting. I mean, as a party, we are pretty much dominated by white middle-class males, basically. And to make us more attractive, we need to be discussing the things which are important to other people, whatever their background. And so I think just the process of discussing online and the process of discussing much more interesting things, having open meetings at a local level, will actually bring more people in from a more diverse community and make us as a party much more interesting, along with the radical ideas that I was discussing earlier.
Thank you. Sure.
When I gave my inaugural address as deputy leader a few years ago, I drew attention to the complexion of the room. And it was once said at a meeting that we had too many white middle-class academic types. And I got up and I said, I'm not white, implying that maybe I'm an academic middle-class type. I think the thing is, what I want from the Green Party is not to be constantly obsessed with the problem of our identity in terms of how we categorise ourselves along these underrepresented groups. We want to be first and foremost Greens. Having said that, we do need to pay particular attention to problems, whether it's diversity or intergenerational equity. And one way we would do that is, for sure, by electing me. Now, I'm not making that my main selling point. That is not an intrinsic quality of mine. But it is something which might be a plus factor. And it would, at a stroke, help us reach out to different sections beyond our comfort zone in the country, to have somebody like myself in question time even. You would see a difference. In the same way, as deputy leader, I found a lot of people coming out through the woodwork in the Green Party that I wasn't aware of. Call it the role model idea. It does help to actually practice what you preach and walk the walk. In terms of the youth, so I've got a very healthy, strong connection with Uprising, which is a fantastic leadership organisation for young, predominantly underrepresented people at the same time. And we had our 10th anniversary recently. And I will be speaking to those people in the next year about environmental leadership. And that is another way of bringing the youth in, not just through the university campuses, where I feel that we're very well represented within the young Greens, but reaching beyond our comfort zone. So that's what I would want to do as Leader of Green Party.
And I think this is a major project. The party has begun it. When Jonathan and Caroline stood for leadership in 2016, they promised they would focus on it. They started the process of setting up an equality commission. This was folded into the holistic review, and I think we're looking forward to seeing some good proposals from the holistic review coming forwards to do more, to make sure that we have more representation. Some of the things that they've done, bringing together the different liberation groups, has resulted in big changes. We now have 14% of candidates at the 2017 general election who were disabled, and that was a big change. And that came from focusing on that particular group and working with the Green Party Disability Group. So there is more to do. In our pledges, we've got plans for more mentoring. I know there's technically a mentoring scheme in the Green Party, but it's not really happening. We have got 30 under 30, which the Young Greens run, and that is an amazing scheme. And there's mentors within that. I have a mentee too now. That works really, really well. And then we also have the new fund set up in memory of Jake, as Green Bay was our candidate for Manchester Mayor, really sadly died. And that is going to make a big difference, I think, in spotting talent, bringing forward more people of colour to represent the Greens. But it's an absolutely crucial ongoing project. And I think the other thing we can do to bring forward just a wider diversity of people in general is to campaign more and put more of our spokespeople at the head of those campaigns. And I don't mean broad campaigns, I mean campaigns to change specific policies. So things like boiler scrappage that I worked on, things like immigration detention, ending that, things like halving the prison population. Goals like that would be absolutely great to put somebody as the face-off to become the expert in that role. That's certainly how I came to be known as a person. I focused on the growth of giant 4x4 vehicles. I knew about that topic, and I got well known, and that's why the Greens talent spotted me, and why I've benefited from mentoring too. So I think it's a multifaceted approach, but we have to keep our eye on it all the way through all our work.
Question from the floor.
Thanks. Mike Gold, Havering and Dagenham Green Party. Being a member of the Green Party implies that we are interested in having as much local production for local consumption as possible, and that should be written loud and clear. However, we choose to support tens of thousands of 44-ton Arctic lorries crisscrossing Europe, belching out diesel fuels, and we're told this is for just-in-time production. What it is actually about is cheap labour. It is about getting parts manufactured where it's cheapest and not paying the cost of transporting them across Europe. And what I would like to see all the candidates, I'm sure I know Leslie will, is stand up now and say they will fight against this insanity of polluting the planet, making climate change worse by this inane, idiotic single market. Thank you.
I don't think that question. Does anybody want to respond?
I think it was a provocation.
Yeah.
Okay. Sean?
I mean, you make some really good points there about some of the big things that there are in the big free market system where big global companies dominate. I don't think that's inherent in the European project, as you kind of suggested right at the end there. But certainly Greens have been working on this. Our Green MEPs produced a report, I can't remember in which year, but not that long ago, called The Great Food Swap, which actually put some numbers on the phenomenon you're talking about, and was there arguing for changes within Europe. And you're right, we need different rules for local procurement. There are possible ways in which you can do that now within councils. All our councillors are working on that in terms of supporting smaller local businesses and the benefits there are to that. But it's a much bigger change than that we need. And that's what Greens are here for. We need a different system. We need to be showing how to do things differently, working within sustainable regions, and not swapping all our food back and forth. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point, but I don't agree that it necessarily means that the single market has to go.
We may be discussing Europe later, I don't know. But for me, this is about European Union and our weddingness, so it seems, in our campaign to the single market. And I think there is a big risk here that of groupthink more than anything. Of course, the referendum campaign was very divisive, but you recall the Jenny Jones of this world, who probably really shouldn't have been campaigning against party policy, but she had a lot of good arguments. Let's not forget those arguments. There always was a balanced judgment. You might say it was well over the other side because you wanted free movement and all the rest of it, and all those other goods. But some of the good arguments were to do with localised production. So there are some wins here, even with an expanding EU, even when Poland, and I've worked in the European Union, and I can see what it's like. I can see what nepotism exists in. When the large multinationals went into those newer countries and just swooped in on all those farmlands, it meant that the local population could no longer afford to buy their own food to feed themselves for the West's addiction to certain non-seasonal foods. So let's be ingenuous. If the Brexit camp, whether they badge themselves as that or not, produce good arguments, which are green, we need to acknowledge those. Because whatever happens next year in terms of Brexit, I would like this country to come together. You would get a riot. You would get a riot if somehow the referendum result was reversed. Just think on that. Of course you would. Let's make sure, as Greens, we can not fixate just on the European Union, but look beyond it and try. It may well be two steps back and only one step forward. But unfortunately, that's democracy.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if I could find Jenny Jones' quote on this. Because there's very good points about the fact that massive investment is being subsidised and put in by the EU into industrialised food production in Eastern Europe as a way of undercutting prices elsewhere. I mean, and it's very implicit, as I said earlier, that we need to replace the unsustainable economics of free trade and look at the local self-reliance and resource conservation. So yes, I do agree. I think the single market is a problem. It's the rules of the single market make it impossible for us to favour and support local production of local food. So let's just move on, accept the results of the EU referendum, and then we can look at supporting, with real money, local production, local food, local industry. And those, I think, are central to the green message. I mean, if I can quote you something here, encourage local production for local consumption, shorter food chains, more local abattoirs and local processing. These are all green ideas. And we've been trying for many years to get this changed in the EU. I'm quoting here from a paper by Dr. Caroline Lucas, MEP, in the year 2000. Nothing has changed since that time. We haven't got anywhere. So now, let's change it. Let's change it ourselves. Let's just say we want a green UK. We want to start lower consumptions to start in the UK. We're not talking about neo-colonialism here at all. We wanted to start here and be a beacon of hope for other people to see that we can do it. We can have green policies. So let's do it here and get on with it now.
Thank you. One of our yes or no answers. Charlie, you're going first. This question was submitted by Peter Katie from Barking, Dagenham and Haven. Do the candidates support a people's vote on Brexit with the opportunity to accept the deal or to remain in the EU?
Yes. People's vote.
No.
Yes, although I don't.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question was submitted by Searle. Is Dee in the... Okay, thank you, Dee. Your question was... What's it then? Where are we? Here we are. The economy is usually a big consideration for voters. As leader, how will you build public understanding of the Green Party's economic programme and which policies will you prioritise and or develop? Sean.
Shara. It probably isn't. It probably isn't. Brilliant question. Now, I was part of the leadership team in 2015 when we had our best ever general election result. And I really admire how Natalie performed in that election. She doesn't actually get the credit that she's due. I saw her at close quarters and she was a brilliant leader. I learned a lot from her. One of the things which I thought was a bit of a low point for us, when we finally won the big stage, we should have been reframing those questions. It's no good saying they didn't ask us about climate change, they didn't ask us about carbon quotas. They will. It's the economy, stupid. People are bang on about the economy as if it's something you can eat, as if it's the holy thing that is the be-all and end-all to which everybody can suffer because of. Right? We need to make sure that we reframe the debate. We will, in those big opportunities, we should say, it's not, as I've heard Jonathan say, it's not a transition that we're after. We're after a wholesale, root and branch transformation of the economy into a carbon-based one. At the moment, all our expenditure, all our overconsumption does not properly cost the harm that we do to this precious planet of ours. At a stroke, if we introduce carbon quotas or carbon budgets, whatever nomenclature you want to use, that would be egalitarian. Everybody would have their allowance for the year. Maybe they could take a flight on it even. That would be very expensive. Would they be able to trade or buy off other people afterwards? No. That would be egalitarian at a stroke. It's saying that this is the cost of your life, this is your cost of living, And this is the amount of carbon spend you've got, because guess what? There's nothing more painful than an uninhabitable planet. That might be sound alarmist, it's not, it's objective. It's alarming, but it's a message that we need to convey, whilst at the same time promising people that if you live according to your means, you will have a better life. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve, for a massive question and 2 minutes in which to answer it. Up to now, we've been looking at the 2015 election results and comparing it to 2016, 2017 and all of that. And I think what happened between 2015 and 2017 was we won the argument on austerity. We have been saying for a long time this is the wrong way to go. And having won that argument now, having Labour taking up quite a lot of the policies which we had in 2015, we've got the opportunity, and I wouldn't call it a problem, we've got the opportunity now to talk in more depth about what a green economy means and what makes us distinct from Labour. And I think it's a lot of things, and I haven't got much time, but it's the more localised organisation of economies. It's about cooperative organisation of industries. It's about a just transition, locally led for those places which depend on the old industries, like nuclear, like coal, like oil. We need to shift those people to new, more fulfilling jobs. And it's about social security, the things that we plan, like a citizen's income. We want to give everybody secure housing. We want those people to have those jobs which are more obviously meaningful than a lot of the jobs we all do these days. We want people to have access to free education and education throughout their lives. We want to support arts and culture, and we want to do all of that without economic growth in a sustainable way that can go on for generations and generations. Now that's a huge vision, and it's very different to Labour's vision, and I've got 30 seconds to finish up, but I think that can inspire people. It is distinct. It is, above all, relevant to people's lives, because if you say to people that you've got secure housing, you've got the fulfilling education, you've got the ability to pursue your own lives in the way that you want. So what is it that we're missing that economic growth can provide? And I think that's a really good question to ask people, because at that point they might well turn around and go, yeah, I see your point, and also, yeah, we can keep the environment together. So, yeah, I think we can do better now than Labour, now that we've convinced them on the bigger issues that we were working on. And I think our vision is more inspiring, more empowering for people, in a way that we might want to paint it.
Yeah, the economy, this is clearly the elephant in the room, and it's something that none of the parties, including the Green Party, are actually addressing. We have an unsustainable economy. We have a massive trade deficit of about £95 billion a year. Now, how do we fund that? We fund that by A, selling off our assets, so all of the national entities all go to foreign potentates. And we finance it by debt. And as you know, the Tory government has tripled the national debt since it came to power, somewhere over £2 trillion now. And private debt is also at massive levels. So we need, as I was saying, a degrowth policy, a policy which effectively says, yes, we're going to do something about our trade deficit. And that will mean import controls, that will mean ensuring that taxation is paid by those who can afford it, ensuring that every company or organisation that trades in this country pays its taxes properly. And that's easily done if you're not a Tory. Basically, you just say to them, you cannot trade here unless you pay your taxes, and you pay duty on anything that you're importing. Now and also it would involve capital controls. These are radical changes. Yes, they are, but we are in difficult times. We have an unsustainable economy, and it's only a matter of a few years until we're just like Greece, going around being told what to do by the Eurogroup, and being told we cannot afford anything but austerity. So, we need a degrowth policy, and we need to start it now.
Thank you. Shiraz has to leave before the other two to get on a train to Cambridge. So we're going to take Shiraz's closing remarks now. Then we'll go back to questions for about another 15 minutes for the remaining leadership candidates, and then we will move to the deputies.
Do you want to tell me what the question is in case I want to build it in?
I was going to take it from the floor.
Oh, okay.
All right, I will give you the next one on the list. The next question on the list is from John Tyson. Is John in the room? From the Southern Green Party. Many voters still focus on left and right in politics. At the last general election, I felt a little crowded out on the left due to having two strong Labour and Lib Dem candidates, and noticeable elsewhere due to the significant cut in votes from 2015. Would you ever consider, at least regarding its image, politically realigning the Green Party to the centre-right if it meant more likelihood of winning seats?
Okay.
Go on then.
Yeah?
You have 4 minutes.
What? So, in terms of left-right ideological spectrum, I do think this is an area where we can afford to think outside the box. I mean, I've run local election campaigns for many years, and I once recruited in the same election somebody who was ex-Respect, somebody who was ex-UKIP, somebody who was ex-Tory, and somebody who was ex-Labour. So there is something about the Green Party's conviction and our values which can resonate from people across the political spectrum. And you can even see that in our disastrous 2017 result. Because after giving over the ideological left to the Labour Party for 0 in return, we were still retained our some core voters. And you can see how many of those we retained. And they do not self-identify as being left. So the fact is that we do have the option. If you think about environmentalism, there are a lot of people who do not just align along left, right, in order to be able to make those points. Now, what I want to close on is a theme, if you like, a theme about what I feel the Green Party can achieve and how it can do. For sure, people will talk about the need for rising to the challenge of the emergency, and you understand that as well as I do. It does require us not to make cat-handed strategic decisions. What I think you will get in me is somebody who understands that year in, year out, over many years, there is a green political capital that we have built up. You don't retain loyalty from your voters by saying, you don't understand this general election because we've got tactical voting. No. There's a saying, isn't it? Less haste, more speed. We have to stand firm. I'm in this for the long haul, and so are you, and yet we're running out of time. When I say there on the pull-up ballot, which some people complain about apparently, but I did put it put there, bring power to truth. That's a shift in consciousness I'm asking for. We often do speak truth to power. We did that with fracking, and Quadrilla got their contract. What good is truth to power if people are going to turn their deaf ear, as institutions and people in power will? We need to be more ambitious than that. It's not just about direct action, it's about intelligent action of all sorts. So when I say bring power to truth, think of the great late Tony Benn when he said, this is not a protest, this is a demand. What did he mean? He meant that we shouldn't be apologising for protesting, we shouldn't be asking for something which somebody else has. We need to take ownership and responsibility of the situation as we find it. And yes, that does mean we take ownership, we bring the power to us, just as the 99% said that this economy doesn't do any duty for us. We need to organise that shift in society and say, we're not going to wait for the power brokers, we're going to bring power to us. One of the main things I will have as your leader is my voice. That voice is precious. That is the ultimate democratic currency that we have in the Green Party.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. Sean, would you like to answer that question?
Well, simply that is no. I mean, basically, I'm an eco-socialist, so I'm not going to move away from a left-wing point of view. And I think we shouldn't. I mean, we have and we should be campaigning for some unique and popular policies, which I've hopefully described you. But the most important campaign we need to be involved in, apart from climate change, of course, is to campaign for PR, so that we have a system that reflects the will of the people. There isn't one member of Parliament in the House of Commons who has the majority support of their constituents. Not one. We do not live in a democracy, we live in an autocracy. So I want to see us campaigning very much for localism, for procurement policies. I want to see campaigning on the basis of renationalising the NHS and doing away with privatisation policies and what have you. I think these can be a unique and popular message which people will respond to, but only if we put them forward.
So my answer to that also is no. I think I learned, one of the things I learned from James Byrne in the local elections was how to take votes of all the other parties. And we tend to forget. I got a bit of grief for writing like the Tories can't win here in a leaflet in the council elections. Because apparently I was speaking to the Tories and I wasn't allowed. And we forget that people who vote Conservative, people who voted Conservative, they're not Tories. They don't identify with the Tories. People who vote Labour don't all identify as Labour people, just as all people who vote Green don't all identify as being Green. They're people, and people by and large are great. And you can find, if you find a person, you can find someone you've got something in common with pretty much all of the time. And so, yeah, we have to speak to people differently, but that doesn't mean compromising our values. If you're speaking to a Conservative, they really appreciate our good ideas that pay for themselves, that solve problems. Those are values that Conservatives really get on with, that kind of an entrepreneurial thing. So when I was running for Mayor of London, things like closing City Airport to fill it with housing, with clear arguments around when Crossrail opens, they can go to Heathrow. They loved that. So that was a great thing to be able to talk about. And I think people also appreciate hard work and credibility as much as they value the values that you show and the policies that you talk about. So I think there isn't any need to compromise when talking to try and win votes of all the other parties, but we should not be stinting at trying to win votes of all the other parties. And again, in London, in 2016, I managed to get the second preference votes of most people. I came first on second preferences, which is doesn't get you anything, but it actually is really good to have it. In total, 26% of Londoners gave me one of their two votes for mayor, and we retained our votes, our assembly members, as well, in the face of the most enormously close and tight election. So this can be done. People do like us. And we should like all of the people and appeal to them all in different ways maybe, but not in ways that compromise our values or our ideas.
Thank you very much. Would I like to put some questions on the floor on a subject that we've not touched on before?
I think it's a subject we've surprisingly not touched on before, which is the subject of Ireland. I was born in Belfast. I have ancestors and relatives and friends from both the north and south. Touching slightly on I would like to hear, and I'd be very shocked to hear two leadership candidates going with Brexit, one being a Brexiter, one saying we should respect the results of the referendum. I've known from the start that Brexit is impossible without breaching the peace agreement, and also the historic rights of people on the whole island of Ireland, of freedom of movement, other rights such as voting. So I'd like to hear how people, and I hope Shara also gets a chance to say what they will do about that in the run-up to whatever happens about Brexit, how they will raise awareness about that and try to stop it, what they will do in the event of a no deal, which is a disaster for Ireland.
Can you just say who you are?
I'm Adele Ward from Bonnet Green Party.
Thanks, Adele. Leslie?
There's a challenge. Well, actually, yes, I think I've got the answer to this question, because it was something which came up a lot at the referendum. And I think, as I said earlier, I want to be a catalyst for change. And I think this particular issue, particularly if we get to, as I suspect we'll get to, no deal in terms of Brexit, it will be a catalyst for solving the Northern Ireland border issue by actually campaigning for a referendum on a united Ireland. That's what I want to see. I want to see us have a united Ireland. I'm fully in support of that. So I think this whole process is actually a good thing in making the, if you like, the atmosphere for a support for a referendum on a united Ireland. I don't agree that no deal would necessarily be a disaster for North and South Ireland. You still can have a soft border, and you continue to have one. There's similar situations in Switzerland, for instance. So it's not a big deal. But I mean, the real issue is, what can we get out of this process? What can we do to change our society for the better? I think one of them would be a referendum for United Ireland.
Thank you.
I think that was just an incredibly cavalier answer to something that's really... I can't even imagine the levels of anxiety there must be in Ireland at the moment about the possibility of no deal Brexit. We are seeing from some of the Brexiteers now that they seem to think that might be an acceptable outcome in general, but it's unbelievably unacceptable to people in Ireland to be left with that situation, not only for your daily lives, but like you pointed out, for the delicate thing that is the peace agreement there. I mean, obviously, we have a separate party in Northern Ireland, and we have 2 elected members of the Assembly there, but they don't get to do their jobs properly because there isn't a functioning government. Things are really tight and worrisome there as well. So I think that was a bad answer from Leslie. It does stress, the situation does stress how important it is that we do get the people's vote on the final deal. And I think, it's important for the people of Ireland, it's important for everybody's to get that voice, but even more so for them.
Hi, Joe Taylor from Lambeth. I just wanted to know if you were speaking for the Green Party in a leadership debate on TV, how many times would you mention climate change, and what would be the one policy around climate change that you really want to get across the strongest?
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go to a leadership debate, which I trust will be included in this time, you've got to go in with a mission to talk about climate change, and a number of other issues as well, but you should go in with an important thing to say. And I think nobody would talk about in terms of climate change. It might well be about renewable energy, it might be on the floor. Nobody would talk about reducing the energy we use, and that's the point I'm trying to bring into the debate.
Thank you.
Well, obviously I mentioned this in my speech. I think the most effective action on climate change is to have a degrowth economic policy, which is not possible while we're still members of the EU, but is possible if we grasp our future with both hands and go forward after Brexit and have a unique green message of degrowth. And that does involve, sort of transferring wealth away from the richest and putting it into the sort of services that we want to see, whether it be the health service, the social services, nationalising the transport infrastructure, etc. All of these things which we can't do at the present time, but we will be able to do in future. So, I mean, it is an urgent issue. I mean, as I say, we are within a hair's breadth of getting on non-reversible climate change. So we need to do desperate action. Low consumption starts in the UK. We can be a beacon of hope. So let's move forward for a positive action, real action on climate change.
Thank you. The next submitted question was from Jonathan from Twickenham and Richmond. Here's Jonathan here. How would we stop the Heathrow third runway? Leslie.
Well, by getting rid of the Tories. I mean, that has to be the way to get rid. I mean, we do need a big effort to get rid of. I mean, let's face it, it's the number 2 issue after climate change, getting rid of the toys. All of our nightmares, whether it be on the NHS, whether it be on airports, whether it be on the fact that we're not collecting taxes from the rich and from the corporations who are making all the money in this country. We need to get rid of the Tories. So, I mean, that has to be our number 1 priority. And the way we do that is to have an attractive and populist message. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being populist. I don't think there's anything wrong, with, as I mentioned, the other parties who are providing a message that people will vote for, and as a real alternative to the Conservatives. And that way we stop all this nonsense, such as the third runway at Heathrow.
Thank you. John.
Okay, so in terms of stopping the Heathrow plan itself, we have lots of chances still to do that. We can throw every single legal obstacle in its way until it's been absolutely forced through against all the rationality that there is. We also we need to be able to do the direct action. I know Boris Johnson said he threw himself in front of the bulldozer. Half of London will do that. We will stop Heathrow from going ahead, but that isn't the main thing. Because if we stop Heathrow from going ahead, we'll go fine, we'll build it in Gatwick then, won't we? And that's actually the Mayor of London's policy. So we need to be tackling the alternative to airport expansion, and we need to be pointing out that airport expansion at all cannot happen within our climate limits. We blow our budget if we just build even a couple more new runways. If we expand our flights, we just cannot do it. So we need to build the alternative, and I think the alternative is the frequent flyer levy. It's the best policy. It's a complete reform of the airport tax so that you pay nothing for your first flight, you pay quite a bit for your second flight, you pay even more for your third flight. Those people who take 75% of the flights, who are flying 8, 9, 10 times a year, because that's how unequal flying is in this country. Those people would pay absolutely through the nose to do that, and we think that would do enough to demand to be no new runways, and probably some airports could contract somewhat. We have to be building the alternative at the same time as fighting at every stage against the plans. I used to work with road campaigners, and the tactic there is basically delay, delay, delay. You delay in every possible way while the alternatives become obvious.
Anybody from? Yes?
Zach Polanski, excuse me, Cities of London and Westminster. Meat production is one of the biggest producers of carbon emissions. As leader of the Green Party, what would you do to promote vegan diets and give people more choice?
Thank you. Sean? Yes, sorry.
I've been asked about this on my online questions and whether I'm going to become a vegan. And I'm definitely moving in that direction, I have to say. I'm not vegan yet, I'm not promising, but I'm getting there. And I think one of the reasons is because the vegans have done such a good job of demanding change. Now, actually, if you go into a shop, you can find a vegan lunch in most places. And that didn't used to be the case. And I think we need to continue on this train. Make sure that we're having more meat-free Mondays. Make sure that we're having more options for the vegan. Not let companies get away with not providing alternatives to meat. And I think we can then really build up support for this. Obviously, there's other things that we need to do within agricultural policy, but I think we've got 2 minutes, so we have to leave the train, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I have to admit I'm not vegan. I don't apologize for that, but I think what we need to do is to get people talking about the issue, and the way we get people talking about it is because it's part of our big campaign on climate change. So I keep going on about the same thing, but it is true. I mean, when you're talking about the methane levels coming out of barrels or whatever it is, I think these are issues that will come out when you get the big discussion going. And that's what I want us to do, to effectively start a big discussion, to move the public opinion towards what we're talking about in terms of climate change. But we'll only do that by having a unique and rememberable policy. So I think, yes, I mean, promote vegan diets, we can all do that. We can all support, reducing the amount of meat, and particularly by ensuring that hormone-induced meat, etc., is kept out of the UK. As you know, we may know, obviously, that is something that the American government have been trying to persuade the EU, and they actually have a case against the EU on that particular issue as we speak, and they're winning their case. So, in the World Trade Organization. So we can do it as an independent country. We can I really do think it's about getting going with the public and pushing it towards the agenda we want to talk about.
Thank you. Time to close. Sean, 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm not sure we have 3 minutes, but I'll do my best. And thank you so much for the questions, actually. We covered an enormous range of issues today, and I was really, really impressed by the questions that we got. We are making a really important choice here. It is about where we are as a party and where we're going to be in 2 years' time. And I think Jonathan and I are the ones who should put number 1 on the ballot, because we have a plan for that. Leading the Green Party is not just about what we talk about, although being spokespeople is a very important part of the job. It's about what we do, and what we do to develop more people to come forward, more local parties to be able to win seats on councils. Because again, it's no good sitting back saying, oh yeah, we told you so, we'll be right in the end. We have to get ourselves elected onto those councils if we're going to do what we're here to achieve as a party, which is change policy. So I think we need to be electing an election-winning team. We need to be electing a team who will focus on training up the party, taking what we learned in London, where we increased the number of council seats hugely just now, but only with the help of the West Midlands, who've also done the same. We've got to be spreading that best practice out to the rest of the country, and we need the right leadership team in place to do that. I think co-leaders is the best model. I'm really looking forward to sharing this job with Jonathan if you elect me. And I think it's just vital that we make the right choice for the next 2 years. I know I'm speaking to a London audience, and I think having 2 leaders from London would be important in the run-up to the London elections. But also, I'm pledging to the rest of the country that actually my time at the London Assembly is confined to school term time, so I'll be spending a lot of the school holiday time out in the rest of the country, helping to take what we know in London out there as well. We've got big cities, they've had devolution too, they can learn from what we know about running things like transport systems, and we can learn from them too. So I think it's about what the party's going to do to share best practice, to get people up to speed, get people elected. Because Greens in the room, holding the big parties to account, is why we're here. Thank you.
Well, Charlotte could be being cavalier a moment ago, and personally I think it's somewhat cavalier to ignore the austerity measures that have been forced upon the Republic of Ireland over the recent years. And can I just quote you something from the Irish Examiner itself, which is talking about the Greek credit union. And so this is talking about the recent agreement, or so-called agreement, which was forced upon Greece by the European Central Bank and the Troika. Until 75% of Greece's public debt is repaid in 2060 at the earliest, the country will be subject to enhanced surveillance. There is 42 years of quarterly reviews during which the European Commission and the ECB, in collaboration with the IMF, impose new measures on such as fire sales of public property and restrictions on organised labour. Is that what we want in this country? Now, what we want is an independent country where we can bring forward radical new green ideas in a populist way. Can I also mention, David Malone, who was a candidate last time around, can I refer you to his wonderful video called The Death of Democracy, which shows the real dangers of all free trade agreements to our liberty and to democracy, where effectively things can be forced upon us. We do have an opportunity now to challenge the orthodoxy and bring out sort of like ideas that have been in the shade for far too long. To think radically, to move out and decide what kind of society we want to create. I want the Green Party to be at the forefront of that, not just to keep paying lip service to the status quo. You can't be a radical if you just support the status quo. We need to respect one of the few occasions it's been allowed to British people. So let's stop being angry instead of hope. For the Green Party to lead, not to follow. To bring forward ideas that are unique to ourselves and show the way in the years ahead. For the Green Party to have a distinctive voice once again and to look forward and not back. Thank you.
Thank you to Clarence and Leslie and to Gerard. It's an arduous task, I think, this process. And you now have to run to Cambridge.
I literally have to
Run to Cambridge, and you're off to Cambridge too. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to hear from candidates for the deputy leader.
Okay.
Thank you for staying, thank you for coming back, and thank you very much to our 3 deputy leadership candidates. Jonathan, please.
This is 3 minutes.
This is 3 minutes.
Good morning. Yes, it is still good morning, maybe. Great to be with you today in Islington. My name is Jonathan Chilvers. I'm a twice-elected county councillor in Warwickshire. And I'm proud of our unique green political philosophy, but we must do better at getting our message out. Those principles we have of environmental wisdom, social justice, grassroots democracy and non-violence make us different from all of the other parties, and that definitely includes Labour. So we have urgent things we need to say, not least about the climate crisis, but too often we probably all feel that frustration that our voice isn't being heard. That needs to change, and that's why I'm standing for deputy leader. So if we want to get our message out, our key leaders must be elected to public office. Now, quite a few people over recent weeks have asked me why that's so important. I think there's three main reasons. Firstly, it sends a really clear signal that we're an electoral force, not just kind of an unfocused pressure group. Second, it really strongly demonstrates that we're representing a wide cross-section of the community. To win a seat, you're going to have to get 35–40% of the vote, not just the 0.1% of the people that are members of the Green Party. And so it shows the media and those in influence that we're representing as speaking for a cross-section of the population. And third, it does give us greater access and influence within government, within town halls up and down the country. And so what we have to say becomes more important, and therefore it's more likely to get reported on in the media. So if we want to get our message out, we have to talk about and demonstrate our green principles in ways people understand, on the doorstep and in the media. And as an elected councillor, I'm experienced in successfully connecting with voters who maybe don't consider themselves naturally green, while staying true to those green principles we're all so passionate about. I'm also a strong media performer, regularly appeared in local press and radio, and most recently on BBC Two's Sunday Politics. If we want to get our message out, we need to do better at winning local and regional elections, because without it, we just won't build the credibility and lasting political base that we need. I've run successful target to win campaigns in the West Midlands and advised winning target seats up and down the country on strategy and election literature. And if elected, I will door knock in priority wards in all the 9 regions around the country and Wales within the first 100 days, working hard, listening, and showing that we can do this. So I'm proud of our green vision, but we need to change the way we do things in order to reach more people. So please vote for me as your first choice for deputy leader. I have the experience and skills as a county councillor to help bring the change we need to get our unique green message out. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before you begin, I gather, Amy, you are watching us on the feed. If you would like me to read out your statement, please email it to me, and then I will get that and I will read it out on your behalf. Thank you. Andy.
Good morning. And I'll start by saying that I think people recognise that the Green Party is a party of principle. That's a real strength of the Green Party. They recognise that we're a great party of protest, and it's great to see so many people out and about on green blocks in media campaigns. But I think to move on, we've actually got to be seen as a party of problem solvers. We've got to be of people who are out there not just saying what's wrong, but actually coming up with solutions and being the problem solvers. And we also look at the party of power. We're increasingly getting involved in power and being involved in it. So I think people have got to see us as a serious party. I've been a councillor, I've been a councillor for 20 years, and we came up with this new wacky idea called Target to Win 20 years ago when we were first getting that going. And we won elections in the ward I represent, which factory settings is a Labour ward. We've won every election now for the last 22 years. And so we've won 17 elections. So I've been re-elected 6 times. And we've done that by reaching out to people. We've got a large Asian community, we've got a lot of council estates. We've talked to a lot of people. We are outside our echo chamber. We've really done that job. We've brought people in and helped others become green councils by looking at how we do things. So yes, there's some great things going on in the West Midlands, and we are learning from them now, but some good things going forward. And having that role has meant that for the last 20 years, when the council I represent has been hung, we have been able to initiate and implement Green Party policies. And you ask yourself the question, how many Green Party politicians are able to say that they've initiated policies and implemented them? So one example is we have a £20 million free insulation scheme, the very first free insulation scheme in the whole of the UK, which insulated over 50,000 homes, putting £4 million back into the local economy each and every year. That's an example of a real practical example of how climate change action can have real positive benefits. At another level, I'm involved with global action on climate change through the COP process, where I'm a delegate of the European Union going to the Katowice talks in December. And I'm trying to get ideas across there about local action and how local action can have global impact. So we need to have a plan to get us to 3% of 10%. If we keep doing the same things, the same ways about sticking with our same approach, we will remain 3%. So we've got to grow, we've got to do more, we've got to do the target to win approach and expand them. But not just that, but we've got to make sure that once our councillors are elected, that they stay elected. And we need a lot more support for existing councillors to ensure they get the mentoring that they need to move forward. So I very much passionately believe that we should have elected members in our leadership posts. I believe that would be a great compliment to the leadership candidates who you elected.
Thank you.
It's so nice to see so many familiar faces here today. And I'm stood here asking you to re-elect me as your deputy leader. I have 4 years experience in this post. I've visited hundreds upon hundreds of local parties, listening, spreading best practice, and seen us through some of the most turbulent times in politics. Whether that was seeing our party through the Green Surge, seeing us through the 2015 general election, the 2017 general election, the Welsh Assembly elections, an EU referendum, and countless council elections across the country. I've helped work to spread best practice, but work to deliver in our communities and on a national basis. It's clear that when we work at the grassroots, we get more Greens elected. And by being there and having our unwavering dedication to working with our local parties and with our local councillors is how we'll build on the strong foundations we've already created to take us to the next level. By being there in communities, it means I can amplify your message in the community, in your local press, in your local media, but also ensuring that clear green message comes across at events and campaigns across the country. I've also worked to help diversify this party by doing things like taking on the challenges of the snap general election and saying that because we weren't able to build diversity, that we would ring-fence money to remove the barriers to any diverse candidates standing. To me, we have challenges, but to me, I think we've got huge successes. I believe that we can be the first party in the UK to have 50% female and non-binary candidates. I believe that we can secure diversity, and that starts now, with training and mentoring and ensuring that there's strength of our candidates across the country. I've worked not only on local press and media, but I've worked on national media, being on the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 News, being in different papers such as The Independent, The Guardian, The New Statesman. But I know how the press works. I have relationships with the press, and I know that you need to make them come to you as well. Using things like my experiences with domestic violence to enable us to talk about our policies on women, or even going plastic-free for a week, to amplify our message on plastic use and trying to limit the amount of plastics in our environment. It is clear that when we work with the press, we need to be imaginative and dynamic, and I will build on that experience that I have already delivered on in the last 4 years. I work with you as my constituents. I work for you, and I also build relationships with other campaigning organisations across the country, whether that's being co-chair of the People's Assembly or setting up organisations, co-founding campaigning groups like Another Europe is Possible, which is the only left-wing Remain campaign. So I'm asking you to vote for me first preference to build on those strong foundations, for me to continue with my unwavering dedication, and so that you can see that experience that has delivered time and time again. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. You've got 3 minutes in your remarks.
3? There's only 3 minutes? Okay. Wow. Am I being timed? Of course.
I'll start again.
You can start with like a step right here. Is that cool? 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Good morning. First and foremost, my apologies to everyone who's made it here before with the candidates. I had to go and get some boxer shorts for my 7-year-old son who was doing a sleepover, and I figured the amount of trauma that he'd have to deal with in about 20 or 30 years' time, knowing that he had a pair of dirty underwear in his friend's house, I thought, you know what? My son comes first. Sorry, I put the family before my politics. I apologise for that. But it's very important. All jokes aside, being very, very serious. Just looking out into the audience, London is one of the most diverse cities on the face of planet Earth. We have more people from different cultures in London than probably any other city. And it's not only diving upon you guys because you came here, but I'm not seeing London. And if we as Greens can't connect with London, then how are we going to conquer England? How are we going to conquer the world? And when I say conquer, I don't mean that sort of Trump sense of the word. I mean with our ideas and with our visions. So we've got a lot of work to do in regards to reaching out to different people, to more young people. We are very good at having the gender equality issue. We seem to be, how can I put it? We value biodiversity, but for some reason our ethnic diversity is lacking. We have to work on that one. I would say the amount of years that I spent with the Greens, some of the stuff that I've realised and what I've learned is that we have by far the best policies, but what we don't have is the best communication strategy. And Einstein said that if you do the same thing continuously, it's called insanity if you expect a different result. Since, I think it was the high point of 2016 when we had the Green Surge and membership went like 65,000, we've lost about 25,000 members. That's not a success story. Let's be honest here. Let's be really, really honest. So we've got to start asking some really painful questions as to what do we as Greens really represent. Right now, it's a political vacuum which is so huge. People like Trump, people like UKIP, pardon me? Thank you very much. People like Trump, people like UKIP can step into that vacuum, raising all kinds of smokescreen politics, getting people really emotional, not offering any solution apart from pointing the finger at the other. And us as Greens need to fill that vacuum with some solid ideas which are really very basically understood. It should be the language of the academics and the intellectuals that we use to connect with people, because then we get people talking down to people. And one thing I've got, people don't like being talked down to. That's why they love the UKIP party. because it appeals to that part of him. Why can't we make our politics so passionate and so emotional that people connect and they actually have a passion for what we're about? We don't want to depress people to vote for Green. We want to make sure that people come to us because we are the party, not the third party or the fourth party, which is what is being touted. We are the alternative party. It's a far more empowering context for us to launch any kind of political progress from. My name is Rashid Nix, I'm going for deputy leadership. If you'd ever consider doing something different and expect a different result, you've got Rashid. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashid. I'll take one of the submitted questions first. This is a question that came from Roger Ostick from the Bromley Green Party. Is Roger here? Roger's question is, we'll start with you, Jonathan, and then we will work Roger's question is, how will we make the Green Party more visible and appealing to the electorate to help increase our voter share in forthcoming elections?
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways that we need to do this. I think we have to focus on put all our resources into specific areas. So that means doing Target to Win better. And as a councillor in the West Midlands, I've seen the impact that has when we really focus on one area. I think we have to talk in ways that people understand on the doorstep and in the media. And I think when you just pause a moment to look at the success of the Sheffield Tree campaign and think, well, why has that worked as a campaign for the Green Party? And the answer is it because it takes our big green principles of that ecological wisdom and grassroots democracy and literally brings them onto people's doorsteps, because every time they walk out their house and they see one of those trees, they're getting a reminder of that Green Party campaign in terms of local people having a say, in terms of us putting our bodies on the line and resisting but doing it in a non-violent way, in terms of actually we want to protect trees that have been there for generations, not just for short-term profit. And so we've got to take that and think, well, how can we make those big green principles, repeat that around the country, find those things on people's doorsteps that make a difference and talk in ways that people understand and not kind of massive abstract concepts that don't mean things to people every day.
I'd agree with that. I guess how do we get more visible? Well, it actually being northern helps you be more visible. And I will explain what I mean by that. If you live in Huddersfield, as I do, it's about a half an hour train journey to Media City in Manchester. A BBC breakfast is made in Media City in Manchester, and they ring me up every now and again and say, there's something like, Councillor Cooper, do you know about dog control laws? And I go, yes, I'm an expert on dog control laws. And I will spend about half an hour on the internet on the train on the way down there, and I managed to pass off as a dog control orders expert. And so we actually improve our reach by having somebody who's that close to Media City who's able to go on that programme. In fact, before the 2015 manifesto launch, I was doing the manifesto launch on the sofa at BBC Breakfast, and you can see it on YouTube. So I'm familiar with media and dealing with it. Making it more appealing, I think, making our politics relevant to people's everyday lives. What Jonathan said is quite correct. I mean, if we get somebody elected to a council in a ward, it's actually that they will be the Green for that whole council. It's about the 7th largest local authority I represent in the whole country. And when I speak for the Green Party, for that whole council. And so if we get a Green on every council in the country, just one on every council in the country, we will have a spokesperson for that whole area. And so the Target to Win strategy is a national strategy. It's not simply looking at a small area. And so that's the way we'll get a much greater reach.
challenging council elections that we will see in our history. The 4-year cycle means that this next round of council elections would have been the Green surge year, and we're going to have to work to battle to keep, retain and grow our councillors. It's not the first, there's also the possibility there might be a snap general election around the same time. Something that we've already done, something we've already delivered an increased number of councillors during, and something that if we embed policy that creates the structures that get more Greens elected, that we can achieve again. I've worked on the executive for 4 years, and one of the key successes I think that I championed was getting field officers in place across the country, because you as volunteers aren't able to deliver all of the work in the same way that a paid post can do. I think ring-fencing that money is vitally important, but I also think that we need a next, having also been there while we worked to set up campaign school, I think there's a next step, and that's a campaign school on issues. I know that we can win elections as we're working on things like the M4 Relief Road, the trees in Sheffield, the Heathrow expansion, by taking these issues and bringing them to people. But we need the skills in our party to deliver that at the local level and to teach people how we hand our local council issues on that point. With the M4 Relief Road, for example, that's about investing in trains, not in roads, about the environment, about social justice, and we can use that one issue to amplify our message on many other policies. On top of that, the way that we get people elected is by being on doorsteps. And I've worked to inspire people to come out canvassing, to get canvassing campaigns up in operation, because that is the only way that we're going to get the information we need, the interactions that we need, that will deliver Green councillors. So by working with you on the doorsteps across the country, I'll continue to do that work to make sure that we're out there and bringing our message to people. One of the other points that I've built up in the last few years is trying how we bring local issues and connect them to wider points. So for me, that was the flooding campaign I've been working on. I actually had a big banner made for the next flood that says, "This is climate change." First winter in such a long time, there's not been a flood. So if you re-elect me, it'll give me a chance to go out and use my banner that I've been desperate to make those connections to a local flooding issue to a wider global climate change issue. Thank you.
I'm going to stand up just to show you something about appeal and visibility. I'm not going to skip the format, honestly. Sorry. But what it is, in terms of visibility, this was something that some of my guys down in South London put together for the elections.
Yeah.
And so we had these shirts done. So they took the green ideas, but we just did some new branding, new designing, which guys that were 14, 15 years old who weren't going to vote for anyone said, you know what, I like them shirts, I'll wear that shirt. And they're walking around in the community, in the housing estates, wearing these shirts because they said, "I'm bricks and vote green." And we're like, it's so obvious that we miss some of the really basic stuff. You know, sometimes we kind of get a bit too above ourselves with our ideas and we think, well, we're a small party with limited resources. So what we should be doing is having some really good ideas and being really imaginative about stuff. In terms of visibility, down in Lambeth, where we are now the opposition to Labour, where we have 5 very, very, very good councillors, we should have had more, we got involved in local campaigns that really meant a lot to people, not what you call traditional green campaigns. We weren't out saving trees, although that's part of what we do. We were out trying to save the independent business sector in the business arches down in Brixton. We were out on the housing estates, we were out on the library campaigns. This is stuff that people could really connect with. When they saw us as Greens out there on the front line with them, it was like, hold on a sec, I thought you guys seem to have trees. So we changed perceptions. We did a lot of work with young people. I do a lot of talks around high schools and colleges about what the Greens really represent. It's just changing people's perceptions. You know, they've got a reparations march for slavery next week. We'll have Greens down there. The Green Mayor from Bristol will be speaking at the march. Maybe Jonathan Bartley-Green will be speaking there. So this is completely changing the perceptions amongst people who don't know what the Greens stand for. So what I would say is, in terms of making ourselves appealing, it's just the language. Our language is a kind of exclusive language, and it should be an inclusive language. And that's really what we're about. And it doesn't take money, it just takes some imagination and some political will.
Thank you, Rashid. Do we have any questions from the floor? Anne?
Yes, I'm Anne from Hustings.
very bad management from the local authority. Can I ask this councillor, this group of people, very specifically, the average teacher, over half the teachers in this country now are under 35. Bearing in mind working age goes from 21 to 68, unless you're very lucky at being teaching for more than 30 years. That is less than a third of the age span, and that has serious implications to the models that children see in school. It exacerbates the problems that have been politically imposed by the accountability regime, etc., etc. Can I ask you how you're going to speak about education, which you confront this complete lack of diversity in the primary sector, and the ageism and the intergenerational problems that go with it? And in the case of employment, it is in the public sector. With teaching, it is definitely affecting the older generation, not the younger generation. I'm not saying that housing goes differently, but can you pick up some of those issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, a very real problem. I'm aware of a number of teachers who retired, dropped out of the profession, and find teaching just far too stressful an environment to work in. So some very practical things to talk about. The Ofsted regime is, if you want to send the school into a panic, you say the word Ofsted and it could be in a couple of days. And that is a huge, the whole Ofsted process is a hugely stressful one. And I think that it ought to be scrapped straightforwardly. The Ofsted process has got to go. Similarly, the SATS regime. The SATS regime and how that operates within schools, that testing of children, which is less education and more about getting some sort of league table down. And I don't think we ought to have league tables for schools. I think we ought to be just trying to get every school to operate to the best of its level. So in terms of answering the question, which was very much about diversity and ageism, I think taking that stress out of the process will make more people want to stay in education and not get burnt out. And that will mean a greater length of service for the people who are there. I also think we've got to get rid of this ability for parents to run between different schools like it's some sort of market. I think we ought to make sure that every local school is a good school and not have some sort of market system and try and send those people who've got the money are able to send their kids 10 miles away. We need to make sure that we have a good education system for everyone. And the way that education is mucked around with at the moment, with academies, all that approach, that's got to stop. We've just got to make sure we have a single education system that works and is good.
Thank you.
I just want to say sorry that that's your experience, because when I see teachers and I see so many passionate people who care about children and the job that they're doing, and to be treated in that way is just outrageous by a local authority or by our government. And I think that we need to be clear on the fact that this government has been undermining teachers, but also just undermining people who work in the public sector. The public sector fundamentally deserve a pay rise. But it's not just the same story that you've told I've had within the nursing profession and with other professions, And we need to address this, not just by having a token pay rise that the Tories have come out with, which to me is possibly a sign that they'll be triggering a general election in some, by trying to highlight the fact that they've listened to people without actually delivering a proper pay rise. And we talk about, I agree with Andrew's points on our policies on Ofsted, SATs and league tables. And beyond that, tackling academies as well, which again puts, it's a local issue that I think that we have strong campaigns will work on this. It's something that we can win elections on. We also need to be making sure we talk quite often in our policies on a child focus and an education focus. And I think there is a need to be talking about the role that this has on teachers as well, to be making sure that is embedded in what we're talking about, as well as ensuring that those people who are delivering education, as well as experiencing it, at the very heart of all of those policies. But I also think that we need to be tackling ageism across the country as well. And we've seen huge impacts of older generations, but very specifically older women across the country, whether that's looking at what happened to WASPy women and their pensions, or whether it's looking at this increase of support of younger people in roles which are on lower salaries, and then getting rid of experienced, highly paid people who are able to deliver genuine results. And I think that ageism is something we also need to be highlighting and tackling across society as well.
Very good question. What I would say first up, I don't know whether I'm foolhardy, but come the new academic year, I go to a post-grad teacher training, so I'm going back in, and I'm over 35 years old, because I spent 19 years working in education, especially with children, designing mentoring programs, working with what they call the hard to reach, the hard to teach, but I never qualified as a teacher, and so I realised, okay, let me bite the bullet, rather than criticising from the outside, let me dive in. Like I said, if you do the same thing, continue and expect a different result, it's called insanity. So we have to dive in and we've got to make the change. So what you're saying about the ageism, because it's very, very true. I come across a lot of children in schools and their teachers like 26 years old. And I'm thinking, I've got children that are in their 20s. And the funny thing is that I was in the school last week, I did a series of workshops on, and I said to the students, it was like year 8, year 9, so they were like 13, 14 years old. I said, yo guys, I'm an old man. They said, sir, you're not an old man. I said, trust me, I'm older than your teacher and your parents. I'm an old man. They said, no sir, you're not an old man, because your mind and your ideas are young. And so I realised it's about the mentality that we bring with us into the space. And so what I would say is that if we are critical of what's happening in education, we've got to be very realistic as to what we as Greens can achieve. Okay? In terms of giving parents a true alternative, we should be maybe helping parents on the options which they currently have in terms of setting up schools themselves, where the parents can lead the agenda. Because as it is, with education what it is, it's another industry. And unfortunately our children are being taught in these subjects which don't prepare them to actually go out and deal with life as it is. So we get a lot of children being excluded from school, not because they're bad, but because the education doesn't work for them. And the link between 9th primary school exclusion is coming out. So I would say empower the parents to set up alternative educational provisions. As he goes back into education in September, I must be a sucker. I'm with the Green.
I'm possibly not. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think you put your finger on something that's really important. I have 2 daughters, both of whom are in a primary school which is excellent. It's in a really multicultural area. It's a fantastic school. They do a fantastic job. But I see that thing where most of the teachers are under 35, and that concerns me, both because what you touched on, the lack of intergenerational experience that children are having, but also that loss of experience that those schools are losing for the long term. And this is a problem within the wider public sector. Within the county council, I've been pushing quite hard to talk when the county talks about social services recruitment. I'm saying, but what about retention? How are you going to keep people who are committed professionals, and yet they're leaving after a year and 2 years because of the stress? You won't need to recruit if you can retain your staff, and that is not all about money, that is about job fulfillment, it's about trusting people to get on and do their jobs. And I think the same applies within the school sector. We do need this balance between accountability and trust, but that balance is wrong at the moment. And I'd like to see much more emphasis placed on clusters of schools, groups of schools moderating each other, and more emphasis being put on that. And there are now some very early signs of some aims to how can we reduce teacher workload, but we've got to go a lot further on that.
Okay. The other thing which needs mentioning, of course, is the pupil premium issue, which is going to mean that there are going to be big cuts coming down the line to a lot of schools. The school where I'm a governor is going to lose £100,000 on this budget. Now that's teachers. And that's going to put more pressure on. So we've got to make sure that we're ahead of the game in knowing about those sort of issues and making sure that we're getting that in front of people.
Thank you. The next question is from me, which I submitted very late. It was very clear last night that the US Secretary of State is in Australia and that Australian officials have been left with the distinctive lesson bombing of Iran will begin next month. So my question is, we live in hyper-militarised times, where military solutions are the first thing that governments reach for, and how do we change that occasion? Amelia.
Such an important question, and I think that for me, the Stop the War movement was the point that engaged me in politics, and was a movement, I think, for many people of my generation, that made people realise that it's political decisions that oppress people. And by building that movement, I think it's vitally important that we continue this grassroots campaign of 1 million people on the streets, of getting people out and publicising the atrocities that our government continually creates on the international scene. Because it simply isn't good enough to be going in with your weapons, to be talking about nuclear weapons, and to be continuing to invest in an international arms trade that fundamentally means that Britain is killing innocent people, not just when they take military into different countries, but as a result of other countries doing the same. We need to continue to campaign to stop the production of weapons, to stop the selling of weapons from the UK. We must build movements to ensure that our elected representatives don't vote for bombings or for invasion in anywhere in the world. And we must ensure that we are building our party around our anti-war message that has consistently been clear, whether that was from Iraq or Iran on the previous occasion, whether that's Afghanistan, whether that's Syria. We must continue to promote that stance while the Labour Party are arguing about what they're going to do and if Jeremy Corbyn is going to press the nuclear button. We can stand there proud and say that we do not believe in any militarisation and proudly say that we do not believe in in any nuclear weapons.
Okay, your question was, in these hyper-militarised times, how do you change the equation? It's a very good question. I think the link between what we know as the military-industrial complex and mass media and how the information and the narrative is structured in such a way, I think we've got to work out. You're obviously a man of great vision. I respect the questions. But like I said, to know that the link between the military and the media is so strong, to get out a counter-narrative that's truly effective, is hard work. I was one of those people that demonstrated in 2008 in Iraq. There was too many people on the streets, right across the board. If there was one moment when you think change is going to happen, that was the moment. And what happened? A couple weeks later, boom, they go into Iraq. And 15 years later, we're still clearing the base. And you think, wow, okay, well, whatever tactics we're doing, we need to have a complete rethink because it's not working. Demonstrations with placards doesn't work. There's got to be something else. And maybe we've got to start going on an information blitz to expose some of these politicians and their links to the military-industrial complex and how they're being bought and paid for by arms manufacturers. And those MPs who voted, when Jeremy Corbyn tried to put the motion through Parliament to stop the arms sales in regards to Yemen, and his own Labour MPs voted against it. But like, all those guys should be exposed. We should be making political capital out of the fact that we have very, very duplicitous people in office who get elected on our backs. They create havoc, and we're left to clean up the mess that they create. We should be very, very merciless and very, very plain and very, very simple in how we expose people and their links to this very, very, very dangerous game that we're playing here. I mean, I don't know what we can do apart from that, because like I said, I don't think, I'm tired of demonstrations. Martin Luther King said in 1966, I'm tired of marching. That was 52 years ago. We need to change our tactics. We need to expose the links and who these people are and embarrass them into doing something different.
Yeah, hyper-military time. I think we're coming out of one of the, statistically speaking, violent conflict has declined significantly over the last 60 or 70 years. And I think it's a massive shock for certainly my generation that we seem to be coming out of that, because everything we've taken for granted over the last 60 years in that way actually seems to be falling apart, and I think that's a massive shock for people. I think so many people think that doing something equals, oh, we've got to take military action, because that seems to be the only thing we can do. I heard that argument a lot with the Syrian conflict. That doing something does not mean bombing people, but we can resist peacefully, but very firmly. And so I think we can demonstrate that we will pursue peace with the same rigour that others pursue war. And I can think of some of the peacemaker teams that have been going into Iraq over the years. I think of actually the Iran nuclear deal that Obama got, which took years and years. He was pursuing peace with a rigour that others pursue war. And so we've got to present that alternative that we're not saying do nothing. And actually, pursuing peace is hard. It takes courage. It means putting our bodies on the line. It is a weak and easy option. And that is the message we need to get out.
Thank you. The question was, how are we going to get across, get people away from military solutions? Straightforwardly, by showing that they don't work. And every time we look back at Iraq, when we look back at Syria, and even Libya, which it's a huge success. We got rid of Colonel Gaddafi. It's now a huge problem there. There are enormous factions right the way across Libya. And the results of these conflicts is often people become asylum seekers, and they become refugees, and they come to us. Rightfully, you can completely understand why people try and avoid conflict. And so it's not something that just happens a long way away and doesn't have an impact. We've got to show that it does have an impact here, and that actually pursuing peace is actually the best way of going about things. So how do we actually get away from military solutions? I think it's by getting closer friendships between countries. Let's have a think about how you might do that. You might have an organisation with strong political links, maybe Parliament, perhaps, where they make decisions on social policy, on trade, and things like that. And where there's these really strong political organisations where people don't go to war anymore, like the European Union. And it's crazy that we're not recognising that the European Union is one of the most successful peace projects that we've been involved in. Must be more of this sort of thing. That's the real success we could have. Trident, £100 billion spent on Trident, £3 billion a year. What could we do with £3 billion a year? An enormous amount of really positive work. That could go back into our local councils, building more sustainable communities. We can save billions of wasted money on military spending and spending on our communities, making a better world and a better society.
Can I take another question?
Come forward.
Right.
I'm Phil Fletcher of St Albans Green Party. I'd like to hear what the ideas contestants have about tax policy.
Thank you. Andy.
Tax policy. Okay, we've got policies on land value, we've got a lot of policies on tax, land value and taxation. We certainly want to tax the rich more and make sure that the tax is progressive and actually helps fund social services, so the rich pay more than the poor. So those are important things. We want to make sure that we actually tax bad things such as pollution and such like to a greater extent to actually make them unaffordable. We want to use tax as an instrument to make a better world. And I think we've got to start from the principle which we often, is often understood, particularly by Conservatives, that we all benefit from a more equal society, and taxation is the way that we actually do that. And so taxation is a good, it's a positive thing. And so when you look at the more equal societies, you look at the society which are more content, they're often the countries which are where there is a more progressive taxation system, such as the Scandinavian countries. And so we've got to look at those, I think, and look at the success that they've had, and the better and local environments that they have as a result of that.
Thank you.
I always think it's interesting that tax is used as if it's a bad word. You know, that money that we pay in to deliver all parts of society, whether that's our hospitals, our schools, the very pavements that we walk on. And I think for far too long has that been the case, but on top of that, for far too long, have big businesses been freeloading off our taxpayers' money by taking advantage of tax loopholes that means that they don't pay their fair share of tax here in the UK. It's frustrating to look at us plunge out of the EU, which was the greatest force for tackling these loopholes. And I think that we need to be challenging that. I was very proud of Molly Scott-Cato's work on the bad boys of Brexit, which highlighted those people that were going to take economic advantage of the fact that we leave the EU as a result of their growing and stronger policies on tax havens. Because this is a question about the kind of world that we want to deliver. It's about a fair world. It's about a world where if someone's sick, that they get given the same healthcare, regardless of who they are or where they've come from. And I think that we need to be tackling that question around tax from the perspective of that vision of the kind of world we want to build. Because I think that that fairer world is just around the corner. We are winning those arguments on austerity. We've been winning those arguments on issues like the NHS. And we need to be continuing to do that, not just on tax, but also on how we use that tax to subsidise to build that world. Whether that's looking at subsidies to support clean energy or subsidies that support local communities. There are so many interlinking issues that we need to be addressing by creating that bold vision and seeing where we can put our money, as well as challenging and tackling those people who are free riding of every single one of us.
As a man who's currently being pursued by HMRC, this is very dear to me. I wrote him a letter and I said, how the hell can you have a system where the Duke of Westminster avoids 3.5 billion in inheritance tax and you're chasing me for late filing? I'm like, are you guys crazy? I'm not paying a penny. That's what I told him straight. I said, I'll make a political capital out of this and you are my guinea pig for my cause here. To know that the Hong Kong tax code is about 300 pages. So everything that they need to say about taxes, they say in 300 pages. The UK tax code, the last time I checked, I can't do it as a hobby, but the last time I checked, it was over 18,000 pages. The revolving door between private accountancy firms and people should go to jail for that stuff. Like, people really should be locked up. Because the result is this country loses over £120 billion a year in taxes which could be collected because these loopholes are exploited by the same people who wrote the loophole in the first place. I think my Nigerian friends are called a 419. It's called a scam. and we have to be very clear and use the language which people actually understand. When we get into this technological tool, we blind people. The reality is it's a scam, it's a hustle. And like I said, my Nigerian friends say, oh, it's 419. Yes, we know all about this stuff. So I think that in terms of the taxation, we need to highlight the fact that the system is so completely and utterly corrupt that it's not going to work. And that 120 billion that we lose every single year, that's your schools, that's your education, that's your NHS. That's where the money's gone. And unless we start holding people to account, and that's where we should be looking at, then we won't get a result, because the same people who are avoiding paying the tax are the same people who are putting millions of pounds into the mass media. So we're watching programs about the lifestyle of the rich and the famous. We should be watching programs about the lifestyles of those who go to jail for avoiding paying their taxes. Do you see what I'm saying? It's very simple stuff. Thank
you. Yeah, we can use tax to help restructure our economy so that it is a more green economy. And so that does mean taxing pollution, so it reflects the true ongoing cost across generations. And it means taxing materials and things like plastics. But it also, I think, this is something I don't think we talk often enough about in the Green Party, it means taxing some things less. So it means taxing employment and good work, it means taxing that less. And so when you think of a practical example about repair cafes, we want there to be new businesses repairing and mending things again, because we put tax up on materials, we put tax down on employment. And I think we can get much better a party about talking about both putting taxes up and putting taxes down. And so the second thing I want to say is that as a party, we do not have a good reputation for getting our numbers right when it comes to tax policies. We are in the last election, we claimed, that I can't remember the figures, that the sugar tax was going to bring billions into the public coffers to pay for the public services we all hold so dear, but yet we didn't take into account the fact that we would expect people to use less sugar and therefore we would get less tax back on that. And so, to be honest, I met quite a few people in the last couple of elections who said, you know what, I'm trying to decide between voting Green or Conservative, but to be honest, I think tax and economics are loopy. And we've got to do something about that and get that right.
Thank you.
Well, I've had a go.
You've had a go. Yes.
But just to agree with Jonathan, financial transaction tax, we overplayed the amount of money that we could have got out of the financial transaction tax. And that affects our credibility.
Structure, yes.
Thanks. Thank you. Elizabeth, Hackney Green Party. So my question is, what do the candidates actually think the role of deputy leader is? What do you think or see yourself doing on a day-to-day basis? And how would you differentiate that from the role of co-leader or, just another role within the leadership team?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Amelia.
It's been interesting doing this job for 4 years, because in many ways I feel like I have built the job around myself and the expectations of what you had of what the deputy leader was. Because when I was first elected in 2014, the role was unpaid. However, with the Green surge in the 2015 general elections, your expectation was that you would have leadership in your communities, doing local press work and being on doorsteps. I listened to that and reacted to that to make sure that you had the leadership support that you were so vitally thirsty for. This isn't enough to just have one person doing it. We need to have a strong team to make sure that we're supported. On top of that, I've listened to the kind of campaigns that you want to be amplified in media as well as your communities. This campaigning work is, again, how you take on your own campaigns and promote issues that are typically green issues, but simply by focusing on them and delivering on them, we can get that unique green message across. It's something that I can do as an individual, as well as representing the party on those platforms. Also you've got the whole point of if someone's ill, then you end up having to stand in for them, which again, we do work as a whole. At the moment, we do work as a whole team, trying to support each other, trying to represent it, trying to build a party, and stepping in when it's so vitally important that we step in. One of the things that people don't always see is the administrative work that goes behind all of this. And by supporting the party in a number of different ways, whether that's setting up structures or delivering on different campaigns, then there's a whole kind of backlog. Every single day is different. There's a whole backlog of administration that simply you don't see. But you see the outcomes of that, whether that's in the press and media, whether that's in your local communities, or whether that's as a result of increased election results and more councillors.
Good question, Steve. Very good question. The role of deputy leader, was it involved? Well, I think Amelia's probably the most qualified person to speak on this one. What I see is that I see the role of deputy as being like a roving ambassador for the Greens. So you're that person who, if there's a vacuum that needs to be filled and the leadership is doing something else, you're that person that steps in and you provide that credible voice of what the Greens are all about. So effectively, you're like a point person, and your role is to support the leadership and
leadership. Also, I would say that as a deputy, me, I'll be honest, I'm a grassroots cat. That's where I came from. My politics are the politics of the street. You know, I was the guy that was always in the street corner, like absolutely on the street corner in Brixton, and was holding classes with people, explaining to them in terms which they understood what the politics were of Brixton and how they were being affected. You know, buying the policies that were coming out of the town hall. And I think that's important for us as leadership. The leadership is one aspect, and the deputy, I think, should be like the foil. So you had Barack Obama and you had Biden. Biden was like Barack was like Biden, but as a team, they seem to work. What about Trump and Spence? That's a bit worrying. That's a bit worrying. Because Spence was like, he comes from, what was that, Captain Scarlet? He was like a character from Captain Scarlet. How does that work? Maybe the example of Jill Stein and Barack Obama in the States, that was an interesting combination. And I think that the deputy should bring that flavour, not be exactly what the leadership is like, something slightly different. But like I said, I think for me as a deputy who's from the grassroots, I would take that leadership down to the grassroots, like into the housing estates, into the street corners, and people are like, you're the deputy of a political party, and you're there amongst the people? Oh my gosh, let me get a picture I can tweet. And that's how we're going to raise our profile. I think it's about being down with people. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's three things. The first is that spokesperson role, which is performed, I think, as part of the team, both the wider spokespeople team and the leadership team. And I think that media part of it is about being prepared, so that when a subject pops into the public profile, that a member of the leadership team has got the relationship with journalists, so they can drop them a quote and get in the media, and also that is able to do kind of that translation of that green policy into kind of three punchy points that are relevant. That we've got to be prepared to do that. So that's the spokesperson role. The second, I think, is the visiting local parties, keeping in touch with local views, spreading the best practice, and that's why I'm saying I would be out in the first 100 days, making sure I was visiting each of the 9 regions and knocking on priority ward doors so we get more councillors. So that kind of championing of best practice and visiting parties is the second thing. And the third thing, I think, is a role in the governance of the party. So the deputy leader has a seat on GPEX. And certainly if I was elected, I would be championing making the organisation work in a way that is able to release you as individuals and local parties to fulfil your vision and purposes, because that's what a good organisation does. It releases individuals, it doesn't hold them back. And so my experience in terms of managing staff and volunteers, in my working in homelessness, and as chair of trustees for charity and on school governors, is how do we make an organisation work that releases our wonderful people? And so that's the third thing. Spokespeople, visiting parties and championing targets to win and best practice, and the role in the governance of the party to release us all to fulfil our potential.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, I guess Rashid mentioned Trump Spence as a sort of leader, deputy leader type role. I went to Blair Prescott, where you had a smooth southern, smooth leader there, and then they had this gritty northern deputy, and I think there's a real benefit in having that particular role. I can see how that will go down. So, everybody who actually gets the role of deputy leader will bring their own style to it. And I think whoever you select, they will bring their own thing. Amelia has certainly brought her style to that, and there are things that she's prioritised, quite rightly so. There are skills that I have that I would bring to the role, and I've, as I say, been a councillor for 20 odd years. And so one of the things I do, I want to visit the way any deputy would every local party that I possibly could over a 2-year period. Now, I specifically want to see as many councillors as I could over that period, the 170 that there are. But I very much want my visits not to be simply a royal visit, going, hello, you're doing marvellously. Though that is important, encouraging people to do things. But actually bringing practical support and advice to those parties. Because after 20 odd years of actually initiating and implementing Green Party policies, I've got a few ideas, and I've learned from others as well as I've gone around. And that's actually practical experience that is hard to get unless you've actually been in an elected position in a council where you can bring those powers and skills forward. So that's one of the things I want to do. I would like to be the John Prescott of the Green Party. No, not going to. And bring some real practical support to local governments.
Thank you. A question that was sent in by Phil Fabulous from Southwark. Is Phil in? Shall I read it? Although not mutually exclusive, which do you see as being more important? Putting resources into increasing our national vote share or increasing our councillor numbers through more targeted work? Rashid.
I think, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, to know that we've lost a third of our membership, but at the same time we have increased some of our council seats, puts us in a very interesting position. And as a part of small resources, limited resources, we've got to think outside of the box. I think our vote share is important. I think that really is going to define us, because a lot of times you go onto the doorstep and people say, well, what's the point of voting for Greens? Well, you guys ain't going to win. You can't vote for you. It's a two-horse race. It's a two-party system. You've got a chance. So sometimes we have to really come with a language that demolishes that argument, and people realise that voting for Green, our vote share can increase, and people feel confident that a Green vote is not a wasted vote, because that's something that Labour always used again and again to outfox us on the doorstep. You might be doing well in the polls, but then when it comes down to voting, people say, oh, well, I really like you guys, my heart's with you, but I'm going to vote for Labour because we've got to stop whoever. And you're like, so people died for the right to vote so you could vote out of fear. How does that work? 100 years ago, they had the suffragette movement, and people went to jail for the right to vote, and you're voting out of fear. That's not a very empowering context. So I think what we come with is that we have to let people know that a vote for the Greens is not a wasted vote. You're actually laying down a mark. So I would put the resources into raising awareness and getting people out. That's personally where I come from. Because down in Brixton, people would vote for a dead fox if it was a Labour fox. And it's heartbreaking, because we're out there doing the work and they oh no, we vote Labour. Is that cool?
That's cool. Thank you, Rashid.
Yeah, I would definitely be putting our resources into winning more council seats, so that in those areas we can say, look, the evidence is we can win here, and therefore, you can back us without fearing that it's a wasted vote. So yeah, I don't think it would go, if we went from 3 to 10%, as Andrew said, we could still end up with just 1 or 0 MPs. We might not end up with any additional councillors. Caroline Lucas won her seat in 2010 because there was a firm, long-lasting base of Green Party councillors doing the work day in and day out. And yes, we all want to have more influence, we want to have more MPs, but we've got to invest in that councillor base, and then on top of that, look to get further MPs. And I'd much rather have 2 or 3 MPs and still be on 4% of the national vote, looking at what Caroline's been able to do as a single MP, than I would go up to 10% and still have nobody or just one person in Parliament.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So, quick question. Who knows who Pete West is? One person. 2. Pete West was the very first Green councillor elected to Brighton City Council in 1996. And I often say when I'm trying to encourage people to stand for the council, if you want to see Green MPs elected, at some point there will have been a first Green councillor. And without Pete West, there would have been no Caroline Lucas as a Green MP. So John's quite right. It's incredibly important that we get Green councillors in there. But it's not an either-or question, because we've definitely got to raise our profile as a party, and we've got to get the idea across as a national force. We have the car crash of Brexit on the way. And Brexit will be a car crash in lots of different ways. It will be a car crash for the Conservative Party, certainly. The Lib Dems who didn't show up on crucial votes. And the Labour Party, who have betrayed a lot of the young people who have supported them through this process. And we have got to be ready for that as a party. We've got to represent ourselves, relaunch ourselves, if you like, as a way, and saying, look, here is a party that sticks by its principles. Here is a party that you can believe in. Here is a party that is doing things, going forward, coming up with ideas that will actually take us all forward. So it's not an either-or. Yes, we've got to build our council base, but we've also got to build ourselves as a national party which provides hope for people that at the moment they don't have. And we can do that and we can achieve it, and it's something I'm incredibly excited about. And I want to make sure that as Deputy Leader, we get those ideas across.
Thank you.
I think this is an interesting question and actually ties in a little bit to the question before about what the job of Deputy Leader is, because really it's working to put in place and embed strategic work that creates the structures that increases our vote share and gets more Greens elected, but also how we present ourselves so that we inspire people to vote Green and get involved. The two go hand in hand, but we do need to be, the only way that we'll win more MPs is by winning more councillors. And for some places across the country, although you can deliver a target to win strategy, it's about how you create those foundations and how you build from current successes. And so I think that in terms of our vote share, we can't just, for many areas, target to win alone, it's not enough. It's about how we inspire and increase the capacity of our party. Rashid mentioned the Green Surge, and obviously, so when I was first elected, there were 18,000 members of the Green Party. There's still around, it's 40,000, 45,000. So we are retaining our members, we are retaining our votes. The 2017 general election was our second highest vote share in our history. But I think we need to be doing more in terms of how we convert votes. For me, one of the key steps that we need to be embedding in the party is what we do after we win a councillor or after a local council election or a general election, of going to our G1s and saying, thank you for your support, will you join the party? Here's how you can get involved, and here's how you can build a movement. Because I think that we need to be thinking of that conversion of how we take Green voters, turn them into Green activists, and turn them into potential councillors for the future. And that journey and that story is going, I think it's really important to make sure that we do continue to increase our councillors and work towards ensuring that we get the next Green MP, and in my mind, a Green government.
Although not mutually exclusive, which do you see as being more important, putting resources into increasing our national vote share or increasing our council numbers through more targeted work?
I'm getting a strange sense of deja vu here.
Sorry. Okay, one more submitted from Barry Cooper in Waltham Forest and Redbridge. Is Barry here? His question was, how would you influence Theresa May to hold a second referendum on Brexit?
It's a good question. So I am firmly in favour of a second referendum. I think to influence Theresa May, I'm proud that often the Green Party, once again on this, have been streets ahead of everyone else. Once again, we have been at the forefront of political discourse. A year ago, when I stood in the general election in Leamington and made this one of my 3 key points, I got laughed at, I got abuse, I got said this will never happen, and yet here we are just a year a bit more later, and for the first time an opinion poll has shown that the majority of people want to see a second referendum. So I think the Green Party actually has done a great job on pushing this, and we need to keep getting out there and making that message. The only other thing I would add, which I think is really, really important, is that we're kidding ourselves if we think that most people that we're kidding ourselves if we think that people have changed, lots of people have changed their mind about Brexit. A few have, sure. But the majority of people that voted Leave 2 years ago still say that they wanted to vote Leave and they want to leave the EU. And I want to make sure that, yes, we need to be democratic, and I want that second vote, but I don't want it, I want it done in a way that unifies the country. And as the Green Party, we need to get on the front foot now and address head-on those issues about why people voted Leave while still arguing to stay in the EU. Because if we go into this and continue to split the country, we do that at our peril.
Thank you. Andy?
Okay, well, first of all, it's not a second vote. It's not a second vote, Cherry. It's a fresh vote. It's a ratification referendum. It's about the issue itself. Right, okay, we've seen Brexit, we've seen what it looks like. It's awful, and we want to vote on that. We want to be able to say what we think about it. Because we've got a bit of an issue here that the issue with Brexit is that the future of the Conservative Party is at stake, and that, the Conservative government, is more important than the country. And that's the big problem that we've got to overcome. One thing that we are seeing with the whole prospect of a no-deal Brexit, a very real possibility, is that there's a whole issue with food, with air travel, a whole lot of issues that are coming down the line, which is showing us that the implications of a no-deal Brexit are even worse than Brexit with some sort of deal attached to it. So one issue I want to take issue with Rashid is I think we need to keep going out on the streets. I think wherever we happen to be is getting out there and getting involved in protests to make sure that people are aware that mass numbers of people are concerned about this. And we've got to, I think it will be different than Jonathan believes, because I think young people since the Brexit vote have become much more mobilised than they were before. They will care passionately about their future, and the electorate has changed. Because the years have gone on, and those people, those 16-year-olds who are looking at all those people who are going out to vote thinking, that's my future and I can't vote, will have the chance to have their say, and we need to give them that ability.
I'm so proud of this conversation about people's votes, because when I set up, I founded Greens for a Better Europe. We ran a very positive campaign. We were unapologetic about our positions on migration and really challenged the Main Remains campaign of talking about big business and corporations, and really put that message forward about human rights, workers' rights, and environmental protection. When the result happened, we had a meeting where we talked about our next message. And Caroline stood in front of Parliament and said, we need another referendum on the terms of Brexit, because you'd never sign a contract without first reading the fine print. And actually there has been precedent for this in other referendums around the world. In Australia, they had a first referendum on if they wanted proportional representation, and then a further referendum on what that deal would look like. And when we were in Parliament Square just a couple of weeks ago, and there were hundreds of thousands of people chanting for a people's vote, for a new vote on this referendum, I was really proud that as the Green Party we were the first people to put that message out there and have inspired so many people to do the same. We need to be making sure we know that more people know now about what the EU is. Most Google's term on the day of the result was, what is the European Union? And we have a point where even David Davis has changed his mind on many things, particularly on the fact that he thinks it's possible that this country will even deliver Brexit. On young people, we need to be inspiring young people and pushing for votes at 16. The idea that in Scotland people were able to vote at 16 on the referendum there, but then weren't able to vote again. We need to keep pushing that campaign, but also challenge the rise of the far right. If we do, the fact that we're seeing a rise in toxic politics, we do need to still be there, talking about migration and ensuring that we're talking about our friends, our family, our colleagues, our neighbours, and ensuring that we do not allow whatever happens with Europe as an excuse for a rise of the far right in the UK.
Yes, you go on YouTube, there was a video that some of the guys in Brixton put out. It was the Strong Stadium snap election. Remember that, right? And I was saying that Brexit, it's not going to happen. And I was saying from the day of the referendum, it wasn't going to happen. People are like, you're crazy, you're crazy. You've seen the result, it's 52 to 48, it's going to happen. I said, it's not going to happen. Because the stakes are way too high. Like, way too high. In terms of the business interests. And we've got to be really frank about this and understand that the politics of this country is driven by business, it's not driven by the people. So even though the people might not vote for 52 to 48, the fact that the business people now realise that they're going to lose money and there's going to be investment going elsewhere, they're going to find a way somehow to fudge. And as it goes on, I'm seeing them getting nearer and nearer towards the fudge. And the guys who were cussing me a year and a half ago, saying, boy, so what do you reckon, Rash? What do you think is going to happen? I said, I told you it's not going to happen. They'll find a way to fudge this result. And the whole thing with Brexit in the first place, if you remember back in, I think it was 2014, George Orwell goes over to Europe to try and get the proposed bonus cap removed for the super wealthy banker who created the mess in the first place. And because he had to head back, all of a sudden the Brexit argument starts to pick up a whole lot of steam. So really we want to be looking at what's really behind this stuff. What I would say, to conclude, is that Lambeth was the highest Remain vote on mainland UK, 80%. And back when we had the referendum, I did an interview with the BBC and I said the reason why we have the highest Remain vote is because we have the most active Greens in London. We're doing the work and we're giving a counter-narrative to the dross that UKIP is serving up. And people realise that we should get out of here. And now, a year or 2 years later, you now see that in Lambeth, the Greens are the opposition. why? Because we gave that alternative. We didn't say we're the third place or the second place, we said we are the alternative. And people recognise that and it resonated with them. And I would say that Brexit, don't worry, just fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a fudge.
That is all the time we have for questions, so if we could move to the closing remarks, I'm afraid to you again to go first. 2 minutes each, please.
Okay, as a closing statement, as I said at the start, if you do the same thing continually and you expect a different result, Einstein said it's called insanity. So maybe we should start doing something different, because I would say that the young people who aren't in this room today, they are looking for some sort of vision, some sort of leadership, some sort of narrative that gives them a hope. Because right now I'm working with young people and I'm seeing a sense of nihilism that is playing itself out at so many levels because they see no hope. And we need to be really clear upon the responsibility that we have as Greens. Also, in terms of retention and membership, from the Green Surge days of maybe 2 years ago, like I said, we were 65,000. We're now down to 40. If that's an example of retention, then we're going in a very interesting direction in our use of language. I would say that we need to be very, very bold, very, very frank, use a very, very easily understood language, and we have to make sure that we offer people the alternative, not the second place or the third place, but the alternative. And I think that's where it lies. The young people need an alternative. The people who are suffering need an alternative. We don't need, little piecemeal policies to kind of fudge our way forward. Thank you. What we need is what they call moonshot thinking. Putting some bold ideas forward so that people are actually inspired to get up and do something different and take action and get involved in shaping their communities. And I think as deputy leader, the way I talk and the way I move, I go to places where make your ears stand and trust me. No, I'm joking. But for being serious, we need to be really, really clear on our communication. We need to up our game and be far more inclusive in our politics. Thank you very much.
Amelia.
I'm really proud to have worked as your deputy leader for the last 4 years. We've working on, that you vote on, and you propose to conference, and ensure that they are articulated on a national level. My commitment to working at the grassroots, as I said, is unwavering. I've travelled from London to Lancaster, Norwich to Newcastle, working with campaigns, working with different organisations, and above all, listening and spreading best practice already. This is so vitally important to be making sure that we continue on that, because we can't be delivering in 2019, we can't be delivering a campaign from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even though it reflects the council campaign that we had 4 years ago. We need to be using the experience that we have to deliver a campaign for 2019 that embraces the new challenges that we see on a national basis, but we have collected and listened to on a local basis as well. These are going to be challenging elections, and it's important that we have experience to deliver them. On top of that, I've been working across the country to work with different campaign organisations, being on the front line of many of this work. Whether that's as co-chair of the People's Assembly, working to set up a genuine alternative to austerity as a mass movement, whether that was going to Grenfell Tower to work with the community there and actually delivering real solutions to the residents and to the survivors. Or whether that's going up to Newcastle to work with their New Tree campaign, where they have one of the worst spelling records in the entire country, and helping them build a local council campaign around that. We have challenges, but with experience and dedication, we can overcome them, and we can take this party to the next level.
I think it's one of the benefits of having an elected councillor in the deputy leadership team as a deputy leader is when we talk about issues that affect people, I can speak with authority and authenticity about it because it's part of my casework. It's part of things I deal with on a daily basis. So I'm talking about schools and school governor, I can talk about the issues there because I deal with them practically every day. Talk about cuts to disability, I can give examples of how those have affected people in an area I represent, where ordinary folks go out and vote for them. So having people actually elected in leadership teams is important. It's important because it shows that we don't just rely on ourselves and some sort of echo chamber, but we're actually involving people who've gone through a process. I'm going to the COP climate change talks in December in Katowice as an EU representative. And at those talks I'm going to be putting forward a new concept called locally determined contributions. And what that means is giving more power to local authorities to influence climate change. So if you think about your own authorities, the own that you represent, it would bring action on climate change down to a local level. And I'm going to be talking about that as deputy leader of the party, talking about practical solutions that we can actually do to climate change, which brings it closer to people's everyday lives, so they can feel that they can actually make a difference about it. So when you're insulating homes, you're dealing with fuel poverty. When you're building new homes, you're building passive homes. So let's make it real. Let's make sure that we're not talking in a highfalutin way about things, but on a very practical level to how we can help people and bring that home to people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming today, and I think there's been a great range of questions, and it's been a real pleasure to discuss them with you. And I'm deeply proud of that unique green philosophy that we've been discussing today, but we do need to get better at getting that message out and making sure we are talking in a way that people understand on the doorsteps. And we need to know that we can be both radical but also relevant and realistic. We can do that as a party. We don't have to lose our radicalism just because we're being relevant and realistic. And we've talked about a number of those policies today, particularly pleased to talk about the green economy and how we restructure our economy. There's also some things we haven't talked about. I represent one of the poorest areas in my town, and every day I see the impact of the fact that 1 in 3 children in our country are still in poverty. And I know working in homelessness and addictions and mental health for 13 years. There's so many things that as a party we can help walk alongside people and be a voice for people in those situations. So I'm proud of that green vision, but we need to change the way we do things. And I've got the skills and experience as a twice elected county councillor to help the party make the change and get that message out. Thank you.
And thank you all for your time, and thank you indeed to all of you for coming.